Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're a few minutes late. It's 7:36. It is February 24th, and this is a work session for the Village of Ossining. And I think everyone that needs to be here, it looks like, is here. I think let us start with the pledge. Thank you, Maddie, for having the flag up for us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let's see, is village manager on? Yes, should we go to trustee announcements? Karen, you have you're muted.
If the trustees, do you want to do trustee announcements first?
Yeah, I think I'd like to just get that done and then move on. Does anybody have announcements?
I have something.
Great.
One of the committees that I'm a liaison to is the Ossining Arts Project. And this is a group of folks who put together things in the village that are obviously inspiring artistic efforts, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether, you know, so they're in the process of coming up with some ways that, you know, art has a way to heal, right? So they're coming up with some ways to create events and projects that will help brighten our mood and lift our spirits as we hopefully come out of this dark winter. One of the things, now this is not an Ossining, this is an Ossining Arts Council, which is another group, and the Westchester Collaborative Theater are actually doing their Living Art event for 2021. And Alan Lutwin, who runs the Westchester Collaborative Theater, is a member of the Ossining Arts Project. And if you've ever done this in person, it's fun. You go, you look at paintings and artworks by the Ossining Arts Council artists, and then you'll get to one and you'll stop, and all of a sudden they'll start doing a one-act play inspired by that piece of art. So this is the same idea, only it's virtual this year. And what you do is you buy your tickets online, and then you can watch the live streamed event. It's going to be 4 Saturdays in March, 6th through 27th. And there will be 7 plays. And the ticket price, which is $25 for general admission, will get you the link to the live stream on YouTube. And to get your tickets, you go to wctheater.org. And I think it's just going to be, I always love this event. I always go every year. This is the first time I will go virtually. But I think we need to support the arts now. And this is one way to do it.
Thanks, Dana. Anybody else? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand, so I would actually simply like to say that I'm going to encourage people. More and more people are getting vaccinated, not as many as quickly as we want. Please still need to wear the masks, still need to, I beg you to keep the same diligence about keeping distance from people. The weather was really nice today, more people were outside, so I would encourage everybody to just stay healthy. If you've made it this far, let's go all the way. In relation to COVID, we've sort of passed a milestone, an unhappy milestone. Somewhere we've reached about 500,000 deaths, and it's also somewhere around the middle of March is, if you will, the first anniversary of the pandemic. Many places around March 13th to about the 23rd or so is when things just one after the other, restaurants, businesses, schools, everything started shutting down one after the other. I think most of us thought it was going to be a couple of weeks. It's more than a year. And in commemoration of that, the village staff has been working diligently about doing some sort of memorial. And we've come up with a date as of this morning that the town and village will be looking to break ground, if you will, on a memorial for COVID for those in our community that have passed on, that have suffered, and there are many of them in the sitting part, Nelson Sitting Park. I'm going to keep it a little bit of a surprise exactly where and all that's happening. And we're going to have a socially distant unveiling, if you will, but I think it's going to be something that's meaningful to the community. So I'm going to do a save the date for March 13th on your calendars in case you were thinking of doing other events or seminars or Zooms. Please keep your calendar open on the morning of Saturday, the 13th. I think it'll be something meaningful and longstanding for many years to come for the community. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront, and I am going to turn it over to Village Manager Detroit to continue with the work session.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight, our first agenda item is a follow-up with our comprehensive planners, consultants, BFJ, and we will be focusing on the comprehensive plan.
You're on mute, Karen.
I am really sorry about that. I thought I unmuted. So,
well, we
anyway.
heard you in the beginning, actually, and then
it just I didn't even touch the computer. Something's happening. So anyway, with that, I would like to turn this over to our comprehensive plan consultants at BFJ to follow up and briefing us on the comprehensive plan and our progress thus far. So thank you. Sorry about that.
Karen, I'm going to give a little introduction to the slide presentation, and then Simon's going to go through the two zoning issues, and then we'll have a little discussion of the DEIS, and turn it back to you all for for a workshop discussion. So tonight, we had been scheduled to focus a little bit on item 1 here, the proposed zoning code changes. So we thought we would do that. We also we got today 2 responses on them from some of the trustees and the mayor. So we'll try at the end to discuss those. I think those would be important. We do want to discuss, as well as the zoning, the next steps in the environmental review process. That's the EIS. And I think you've all had copies of that, so we want to discuss that for a moment. And then any comments on the comprehensive plan itself. So those would be very helpful tonight. What we're trying to do is get ready, as you all know, for March 3rd to where we're hoping that you could set, if we stay to the outline we did with Stuart, set a public hearing for the 31st, for the end of March, on the comp plan, the proposed zoning code changes. And we're also hoping on March 3rd that you'll be able to be in a position then to just accept the DEIS for public distribution, so the public can see it and then comment on it. So those are the items tonight. I think the next slide, we just go into here. Someone asked about opportunities to comment on the plan, the zoning draft generic environmental impact statement. And really tonight is about that. We hope that people can obviously comment at any time, through the village manager or any of the trustees. But tonight's an opportunity. But of course, specifically, there'll be opportunities at the public hearing, which is, we are scheduled anyway. The thought was the target date was March 31st, as you can see here. And then after that, there would be additional opportunities for comment. Usually, most cases, we find boards will hold open the hearing for either written comment, or if you need a second hearing date, as you know, we've got a fallback position for a second hearing date. So there'll be continuous opportunity to comment on things either at the public hearing or in writing. And then on the draft generic environmental impact statement, once you've accepted that for the purpose of public comment, then there'd be a comment period. Seeker provides for a comment period of 30 days. So we would suggest, for instance, if you did accept it on March 3rd, if you could close it, maybe April 2nd leaves more than enough time. It leaves, nearly 40 days rather than the 30. So that's the opportunities. There'll be a lot of opportunities to comment on the drafts, particularly at the public hearing and the comment period on the EIS. So that's an overall just comment on opportunities to for the public and for yourselves to make revisions, changes, comments on the different drafts. But tonight on zoning, we just wanted to mention that I think most of you are familiar with the form-based zoning, because we did have a couple of, you can see them here, a couple of sessions on it, September 10th and October 14th. And then, as you know, on the overlay zone, we had a walking tour downtown of how things might work. And then also, along Croton Avenue. And we're very pleased that several members of the board had the opportunity to take those walking tours. Then we also had a discussion of proposed zoning changes October 28th with Jonathan. And for our discussion tonight, Jonathan Martin from our office is also going to join us. Then the draft T district, November 3rd, we sent changes back to the Board of Trustees. And then in December, we had a discussion of potential changes in the S75 district. So I think at this point, we thought we had now reviewed the comprehensive plan with you in a separate session, and tonight would be just a point where we could review these key zoning suggestions that have been made to you. So with that, I think the next slide just starts to go into these proposed zoning code changes. So the package that's before you, that's been sent to you, is really that form-based overlay district for downtown and Croton Avenue, then possible modifications to the T-zone, and then modifications to the S75 district. Those are the three things that were brought forward in terms of zoning. So those are the only three that are currently before you from us. I wanted to say on the comprehensive plan does have in it additional recommendations regarding accessory dwelling units, which we've discussed a bit with you, and the MF3 zoning districts, and potential for other zoning changes. But the comp plan does not call for any action on those. It leaves it to you in the future. And I think it's important that those recommendations, they don't mandate any board action, but they also don't preclude a future yourselves or in the future, if you wanted to take up one of those issues, you're free to do it, because and in fact, the plan simply suggests or sets the table, so to speak, to do that. So it's entirely up to you. So I wanted to be clear, just the three zoning things we're talking about tonight that could potentially go to public hearing are the top three there listed as the form-based code, the T district, and the S75 district. And what I want to do, the next slide just starts with the form-based overlay district, and Simon's going to cover these three items now: the form-based district, the T-zone, and then the S75. And we wanted to go through the recommendations so everyone's clear on them. We realized that we've gotten comments now from three trustees as well as from the mayor, and we would discuss your comments.
Right.
So
Thank you,
Simon,
Frank. Thanks everyone. I'm going to try to be brief while covering the main points here, just because I know that you all have a busy night tonight, but we want to cover some high level items here in the zoning, and then get to a discussion from you. As Frank said, we did receive your comments from four of you. I just want to highlight before I get into this that what we're presenting tonight is what's in the package, in the draft zoning package that we've sent to you. It doesn't reflect the changes or the suggestions that you sent today. It's not that we're ignoring them. We want to talk to you about them and get direction from you. But I just wanted to make sure that you all know that it's not because we're discarding your suggestions, it's because we just wanted to be consistent with what we've submitted we'll make changes going forward based on what we talk about tonight. So the first one here is the form-based overlay district for the downtown and Croton Avenue. The key issues that we were trying to address with these zoning recommendations are here on the slide. It's being or recognizing the changing real estate market. There's less of a demand for commercial in village downtowns. There's more of a demand for residential. We also want to make sure that new development, new buildings that are built on infill sites in the downtown fit in. They're consistent with the historic feel of Ossining. They also provide resources to improve the public realm. That's in the form of a community benefits fund that we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. But also one thing that's helpful with the form-based code is it's very cognizant of the need to improve walkability and pedestrian access in the village, and the form or the design of new buildings is sort of required to be mindful of that and produce positive outcomes for pedestrians. So what that looks like in terms of the proposed zoning is here on a couple of slides, and then we'll have some graphics to get into some of the visuals. But the first one here is allowing residential as of right, or as a principal permitted use in the downtown and on Croton Avenue. Right now, residential is permitted, but by conditional use permit. So it's just a barrier that exists in the code. The second item is removing the requirement for ground floor retail in some areas. It's not all throughout the downtown, for example. It continues to require retail on the ground floor along Main Street, for example, where retail or commercial use is still appropriate. But in other areas of the downtown where ground floor retail is maybe not as critical or necessary, it would provide more flexibility and allow residential as well. The third item, requiring compliance with form-based guidelines. This is a key aspect of any form-based code. The idea behind this is to produce new buildings that are more contextual with the historic look and feel of Ossining. So that's a key aspect here that's in the form-based zoning. And then the fourth item, thinking back to that benefits to pedestrians, is requiring a wide enough distance between the curb and any new buildings to make for a comfortable, accessible pedestrian environment on the sidewalk. Continuing the zoning ideas here, the first item is providing an incentive or a bonus to encourage a developer of a new building to opt in to the overlay district. I'll get into some of the details of that in a couple of slides. But that extra story is required to set back in the downtown, maintain the existing street wall. The second item here is very important. The reason this is an overlay, what that means is that it's a new district that layers on top of the existing district. It doesn't replace it, right? So the existing VC district, which is in the downtown, and the NC2 district along Upper Croton Avenue remain in place, right? So a property owner in those areas can choose either to remain in the existing or to keep their existing zoning, or to opt in to that overlay. This is different from what folks may have heard about the new form-based code in Chappaqua, where the form-based zoning there replaces the existing zoning, right? So there's no choice for a property owner. They've been fully rezoned. Here we've taken a different approach. We've given a choice to an existing property owner. And the final item is that the form-based overlay zoning doesn't replace the existing review that you have by the planning board or compliance with the existing design guidelines that are on the books. This is something that we've talked about along the way quite a bit. Generally, folks seem happy with the design guidelines that Stephen Tilley developed just a few years ago. And so what we tried to do was develop a form-based code that works alongside those design guidelines. However, the hope is that by having the form-based in place, it will streamline the process for a developer because it's more predictability. They know a little bit more about what's going to be asked of them from a form standpoint because of what's in that form-based code. So just briefly, a couple of the graphics that are in the form-based zoning that we provided. We didn't want to go through all of it because that could take an hour, but I tried to pick out some of the key items here. First, the map where this would apply. The purple here on the left side of the screen is the downtown overlay district. That matches the outline of the existing village center or VC district. And then the orange over here on the right is the Croton Avenue overlay, which matches, not entirely, but generally portions of the neighborhood center 2 or NC2 district along Croton Avenue. So that's where this form-based code would apply in these two areas. Oops. Something's not showing up on this slide. Give me 1 second. Okay, can folks see this?
Yes, Simon, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that some of the text wasn't showing up. What this slide is about is the incentive to encourage someone to opt in to the form-based overlay district. The reason you need an incentive is because you're asking a little bit more of a developer in order to comply with these form-based regulations. And so why would someone do that if there wasn't some bonus? So that's what the incentive is here to do, to encourage someone to opt in, to use that form-based code rather than the underlying zoning. And so in the Village Center District, what that looks like is a 1-story height bonus from 4 stories or 48 feet to 5 stories or 58 feet. And also it changes residential from a conditional use to being a permitted use or principal permitted use. So someone wouldn't have to get or go through an additional step in order to get residential permitted. In the neighborhood center district, what that looks like in the proposal is a bonus from 3 stories to 4. You see that here, right? Same change with residential. It goes from a conditional use to a permitted use. And then one other change here is that in the NC2 district, currently residential is not allowed on the ground floor. And so the form-based zone would allow residential on the ground floor. So those are on the right side of the slide here, those are the incentives to encourage someone to comply. And then in the bottom, you see here, it anticipates that the village could set up a community benefit fund that would support improvements for whatever you decide it should support. It's up to you, but it could be providing public parking, it could be creating new civic spaces or whatever you decide that should go toward. The next aspect of a form-based code, I'm going to talk about this just generally because going into the details would take a bit of time, but the form-based code, the form of it is the frontage or the front of a building, the way the building meets the sidewalk or the street. The code regulates that so that a new building both matches the historic look and feel of the village, but also provides a positive civic space or public space for pedestrians and in the civic realm. So what we're showing here are just some examples at the top, some of the sort of nice conditions that we want to replicate in the village. And at the bottom, some diagrams that show what the form-based code is meant to produce. Now, these different frontages or fronts of buildings are not allowed or permitted across the board throughout the overlay districts. Where they're permitted is dictated by what's called a regulating plan. And if you look at the form-based code or the draft form-based code that we've provided, the lines along the sidewalk, this is just a snippet of that code. The red line here along Main Street, the blue line here that extends along Croton Avenue. That is what's telling you what type of frontage or front of the building is allowed in different parts of the downtown and of Croton Avenue. So that's how the code sort of dictates where these different frontages are allowed. The red line, just for example, is what we call a primary commercial street frontage. It's more of a downtown, sort of village feel downtown type of condition, whereas a neighborhood commercial street frontage, this blue line up here along Croydon Avenue, is feels less dense. It's not as close to the sidewalk. It's more of a neighborhood commercial look and feel. So that's those are sort of the nuts and bolts of what goes into a form-based code. And by the way, just a plug for the website, I've got down here a link to ossiningtomorrow.com/documents so that folks can look at the full draft form-based overlay text so that you can see all the details here that go into this. So that's an overview of the form-based. Let me see if my slideshow will work now, so I can go back to full screen. Okay. So moving on to the T district, on the left side of the slide here are the issues that we've been discussing throughout the planning process that we thought needed to be addressed in zoning changes here. It's the prevalence of pre-existing nonconformities, issues with code compliance, and an opportunity to address an on-street parking shortage. The image on the right, what you're seeing here in red, these are all of the parcels within the village that are non-conforming lots by area, meaning that the lot is smaller than the minimum lot size or doesn't meet the lot width requirements. The areas in orange are the T districts. We're showing beyond just the T zone here, a lot of these other areas, like what I'm circling around here in the upper right, is an S75 zone, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides as well. And then here, these are, I think folks have all seen this diagram. This is a diagram that we put together as a proposal for how we might help to address on-street parking shortage for a building that has an existing driveway, an existing curb cut. That's what this gray rectangle is here, for example. This is showing one way that an off-street parking space could be added. It's off to the side of the existing driveway, so it's not widening the curb cut. So that might be one way, just as an example, that we could allow some off-street parking for some of these parcels that are constrained, that don't have wide enough side yards to put in a driveway. So here's the zoning solution here. I've just bulleted out. The goal up at the top was really to help a property owner who is looking to make an addition or improvement to their home, or build a new home on an infill site, and really reduce barriers that folks are having to go through now that are making it more difficult for these renovations or new construction that the village may want to see. And so just to quickly go through these, the draft recommends allowing 2-family units as a principal permitted use in the 2-family zone. That's one that generally folks seem to think makes sense. It's a 2-family zone, 2-family units maybe ought to be allowed as of right. But we also suggest allowing 3-family units by a conditional use permit. We recommend reducing the minimum lot size from 7,500 square feet to 5,000 square feet. This is more in line with the existing conditions of a lot of these older lots that are smaller than the minimum lot size that's currently required. Same with the minimum lot frontage, reducing it from 75 to 50 feet. Increasing the allowable impervious surface area from 40% to 60%. This, on a lot of the small lots in the T district, it becomes very difficult for when you've got a building, a house, 1 or 2-family house, and a driveway. If the lot's very small, it becomes difficult to meet that 40% impervious surface area. Then reducing the required side yards from 12 feet on one side and a total of 28 feet, which is numbers that are much more appropriate on a larger lot, more suburban type of neighborhood. So it's reducing that to 8 feet on one side and a total of 20 feet. So in that case, you would have an 8-foot side yard on one side, a 12-foot side yard on the other side. The 12-foot on that other side is large enough to get a driveway in. And then that one off-street parking space, which I showed in that graphic before. Then in the S75, some similar issues. A need to reduce pre-existing nonconformities. We've seen this map before. Again, a lot of these red dots here on the upper right, down in here are in S75 areas. and address the on-street parking shortage. So the solutions here, again, reducing the side yard, as I talked about before, reducing the minimum lot width. Again, being more reflective of these narrower lots that exist in the S75. Increasing the impervious surface area, not quite as much in the T district, from 40% to 50% here, and allowing that one off-street parking space. Just two notes here. One is that there's not a recommendation to change the front and rear yard setbacks. The S75 is already similar to the S50. And there's no change proposed for the minimum lot size. That's something that was talked about along the way, but didn't make it into the proposal. With that, that's just a high-level overview. So we're happy to get into a discussion about details. Frank's just got a couple of slides here to wrap up, and then we'll open up for discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to spend a moment on this slide on the DGIS, which you've all, we sent it, actually I should go back and say that we had it ready in January, and your planner, Jaime Martinez, had a chance to review it. We incorporated his comments, and then, February 3rd sent it on to you all so you could see it. Here, this is a sort of a process that's controlled. We call it SEEKR, but which stands for the State Environmental Quality Review process. And if a private client, like we're reviewing some things for other municipalities in Westchester now, if a private client comes in, SEEKR anticipates that the lead agency, that's the trustees, would act on a DGIS or an EIS within 30 days of receiving it. So I think aiming for acceptance of the DGIS, if possible, on March 3rd would sort of meet the intent of SEEKR, because you all got the review document on February 3rd. That's, you're generally within a 30-day period there. And you spent some time, I just go back to the second dot point here on item 1. You spent some time on that scoping document that you reviewed over the summer, and the scoping last summer, I should say. And the scoping document, you focused on 2 items: the impacts of any changes that the master plan recommends, and any changes in zoning, particularly on traffic or on the school district. And so the DEIS does focus in a particular manner on those 2 areas, not to the exclusion of other things that are contained in the guidelines for EISs from the state. So the next step, as you can see here, is it's accepting the DGIS. It's really for public distribution. So the public, theoretically right now, the EIS, the DGIS, is not, in SEEKR language, it's not a public document yet till the trustees say it is. So once you accept it, then it would be put up on the website, and the public gets a chance to see it and comment on it as they wish. And just so you know, there's 2 sort of large criteria for acceptance of the EIS. It's one that you feel it's complete and it's organized according to the SEEKR guidelines. By the way, it is organized following how EISs are normally done. There's an executive summary, there's a project description. Chapter 3 is just an environmental setting, impacts mitigation. That's very important chapter. And then you go into chapter 4, which is other environmental impacts. It's a section required by state law. And then there's a section on alternatives. The state asks to review what if you didn't take any action at all. And then finally, what in a generic environmental impact statement, if future actions were to happen, how are they reviewed under the State Environmental Quality Review Act? So we have those 6 chapters in the DEIS, and we hope that we've been faithful to the scoping document, which you unanimously passed last summer. So that would be before you then on the 3rd, and we just wanted to highlight this a little bit tonight. Once it's made public, then state law provides for this written comment period of at least 30 days. And so we're suggesting, and I'll show you the whole schedule on the next slide, but we're suggesting maybe it go through April 12th. This will allow 40 days, more than the state law requires for written comment. And then what we're getting here is we hope we have a trustee briefing scheduled for April 14th, where we can discuss any comments that you've received on the DGIS. And the reason we like the written comment period is that we know then what a comment is on the DGIS. It's clear. Somebody writes in a comment and they say, hey, this is a comment on the DGIS. So that's the overall next steps for the seeker process. And then Stuart has asked us to remind you all and remind ourselves of what an overall schedule was, and that's this next slide that Simon just put up. So you've had the plan now that was sent to you by the committee, and once you have that, you then, state law provides for you to hold a public hearing within 90 days of getting that draft on the plan. That's one of the items in state law that is kind of important, that you be able to meet. This schedule more than meets that, and you have some flexibility built in. So February 10th, we did have the work session with you on the plan and the DGIS, and then tonight, 24th, trying to just have a discussion with you on zoning. This is the last slide, so I will turn it over to a discussion on the zoning item tonight, and particularly, I think, your comments that you made, that 4 different trustees made today. And then March 3rd, we hope on March 3rd, if we can, based on tonight's discussion, make any changes that you want. And your comments particularly went to the zoning today. And I think if we can discuss those tonight, we can make those changes so that on March 3rd, we're hoping that you could set a public hearing on basis of a revised zoning text and comp plan, and then just accept the DGIS so the public can just comment at their leisure. If you do that, the plan and the zoning should get referred to the planning board as well as Westchester County. And then on March 23rd, the planning board has their own session, and they can make comments back to you on the plan and the zoning. Then on April 7th, March 31 is the big date. We're hoping that could be a special session that you would have so that you can spend as much time as necessary hearing the public. And it really is a public hearing where, instead of a Q&A and discussion, the really purpose of it is to hear from the public on the 31st. We've reserved in the schedule April 7th in case, it goes on a long period of time, and it goes on where you would want to have a second session. We just created that on April 7th if you need it. And then we're hoping on the DGI, as you can see there, if comments could close on the 12th. We could then get together with you on April 14th, and this would be an important session because once you've heard from the public, we would again make changes. We would discuss with you changes that you may want, revisions in the plan, and also in the zoning, based on what the public's had to say. And then we could revise those. The remainder of April, we could make plan and zoning revisions, and also we're required by law to create a final generic environmental impact statement, answer the questions that were raised about the draft EIS. And that would put you then in a position, we think in May, early May 5th, to accept an FEIS, a final EIS, so the public can see it. And then also so that you can have final plan and zoning revisions ready for adoption. And we thought you might be in a position then to make, on May 19th, to make seeker findings. That's the end of the seeker process, and then adopt those findings, the plan as modified as the way you revised it, and also the zoning as revised by the Board of Trustees. So that's the overall timeline toward adoption. It does meet the key critical thing is just that 90-day period from when the committee sent it to you, January 29th, and the public hearing, March 31. It just has to be within 90 days to hold the public hearing. This would more than do that. The rest of the schedule after the hearing really is up to you. I mean, this is just working it out so that we could keep going. And I always find if something gets delayed for a month, you're always looking back. What did we say there? Did we make this change and so on? So this is an overall schedule. And with that, I think the biggest thing tonight is to turn it back to you, and perhaps we did get today comments from 3 trustees via Jaime Martinez, and also we got comments from the mayor. So I don't know if I thought it might be best if we handed it back to you, and we might go through those comments if you wish, and maybe discuss those if you wanted to. This is pretty much up to you how you want to do this. Or I could read off from your from what we received, what those were, and just make sure we cover all of them. Up to you all. Mayor, maybe I turn this back to you.
Mayor, you're muted.
Sorry, there are 2 mute buttons that are on me. Sorry about that. I was going to say, Karen, do you have a few words, or do we go right into the Q&A? Because we've started to put time frames around our agendas to try to be concise as we can. Do you have some words before we turn it to the trustees?
Nope. I think we're ready for whatever question and answers and comments you would like to proceed with.
Okay. I think that there's a lot of work involved in this. I appreciate everybody's work, lots and lots of meetings. There are also multiple initiatives going on. I have some questions, but I do think it's best for me, unless somebody disagrees, that we did put something in writing. It was thought out. I think you should just go through it. Frank?
Okay, sure.
Or anybody.
Well, I'll defer
I'm
here.
looking around the gallery to see if anybody's giving me a nod that says no, but I'm thinking that's probably the best to do.
Yeah, I mean, the first one we got today, and I don't want to, this is representative, I think, of Manny and Dana and Robert. And so I don't want to, but I can, if you want, I can just highlight what we read here. And one, the downtown, I got a sense from the comment that the writers were okay. You know, I hate to use the term okay. The writers were pretty content with the downtown overlay zone, but there was a comment to make sure that that 5th floor was set back more than the bottom 4 floors. And the overlay does do that. It sets it back 8 feet beyond internal, you know, and by that, what I mean is the first 4 floors will be built at what we call a street line. And then from the edge of the 4th floor, the 5th floor would have to be set back an additional 8 feet. And the view there from the designers was that essentially at the sidewalk level, it's really looks like a 4-story building. So it gets some articulation on the 5th floor, and it does set back. But one thing we spotted right away is the comment to make sure historic buildings are protected. And one thought we had there is that that special permit to you, the trustees, or to the planning board, however you want that to be handled, we could write a condition there that any building on the National Register, that the developer or the applicant would have to show that a historic building would not be affected or torn down or lost. That is there.
Frank, can I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead. No, Manny, feel
please.
free to, yeah.
So pretty much the intent of that one is, as you know, we have a downtown district. We have a historic downtown district. So I want to be very specific on this. There are some buildings in the downtown that do not fall under National Historic. So because they don't fall under, that doesn't mean that they should not be protected. I want to be clear, and I don't know. I'm only talking for myself at this point. I don't know if the rest of the trustees that Dana or Bob agree with me in this, but I want to make sure that all the buildings that are within downtown district, historic district, that is here established by the Village of Ossining are protected. Not just the ones that are fall into the National Historic Protection Park.
Right.
Yeah, I think that, we want to maintain the integrity of the north side of Main Street. And there are buildings, I'm not sure which ones are on the historic register, but I don't know if there are that many.
No.
But they're architecturally important. And also, you want to maintain the feel, right? So somebody, if they have a 2-floor building or a 3-floor building, they could say, oh, I'm going to put 2 more stories on. Well, that has happened and it's worked out okay recently, but that's not going to work out okay everywhere. And to me, this is going to apply primarily to any construction that goes on the south side of Main Street. I'm not, I think the HPC governs changes to the north side, to the historic district. But, I think that, of course, there is going to be possibly an infill project up at the top of the crescent where it wraps around onto Route 9. So, there are some opportunities for new construction. I'm just concerned that we may start seeing alterations to our existing historic buildings, and that's just not something I want to see.
So I want to,
Sorry.
I just want to clear up what I thought I read when I was looking at that comment. I think that what I'm hearing is there's a concern about the sort of pressure that might be placed on some of these smaller historic buildings, that someone may look at that and say, hey, I can do a 5-story building, so I'm going to tear down this 3-story building to replace it with a 5-story building. That's the concern.
Or add floors, or
okay, also
fundamentally change the look of it.
Okay, so you want to make sure that whatever the text is that's proposed in its final form would prevent that kind of thing from happening.
Yeah.
One way I think to expand it fairly significantly, Manny, you mentioned that, and you have, as you all know, the historic district downtown, is to expand the protection to say that you're not going to get any incentive floor or bonus dealing with any building that contributes to the historic district, and that there's many buildings that contribute to it. If that building is lost, if that building is demolished, so that you wouldn't be able to opt in to the overlay district. So it would be a means of actually preserving all of the buildings that your survey indicated were worthy of that, were worthy of preservation, or contributed to the historic district. So
Now,
that can be done.
I did want to mention, I think it's probably worth mentioning at this point that the Main Street Historic District is it's sizable, but it's limited in its scale to properties that are sort of adjacent to each other. There are other properties that I remember being identified in a report that was done by the HPC. It was like significant properties in the village that include, I think, other properties in that downtown overlay district that are not in the historic protection district. Are you concerned about those as well? And should we look at expanding beyond the borders of that Main Street?
I'm concerned about everything in the historic district, and I want to see everything in the historic district. I don't want to see anybody seeing any incentives to tear anything down to,
Yeah, no, I think just from a practical standpoint, we just need to have a list it'd be important for us to identify.
Jaime, and that's a great question, but right now we're not talking about the other buildings that don't fall under the downtown district, correct? I thought we were talking about the downtown district, so I don't want to deviate from that conversation, which I think is a great point, but I don't want to deviate from that because, as you know, we do have a very cramped agenda. I think this topic is very, to me, is very endearing as well, and we can go on the whole night talking about this and what could happen and what could not happen, but we don't have all night. There's other 2 topics that we need to address as well here. So I want to keep that in mind, and I want to keep it as short as we can. Frank, if you don't mind, just keep reading the document that we send out.
In any case, I would leave you with the idea that one response we had is to any building within a historic district downtown that's listed as contributing to the district, that means it is significant, that you all had determined that in the past, then that building, you would not get any incentive. There would be no incentive. You couldn't opt in if you were going to tear the building down. So it would be a protection for those contributing buildings. Now, there are what's called non-contributing buildings, and they're not just that. They're non-contributing. They were not determined to be of an historic nature that rose to the level of, the National Register or being, being significant in the historic district. So it's one way, and we can discuss it more, with Jaime or with actually the Historic Preservation Commission. But it is one response we just want to make. We think your objective that you listed for us to try to, I think your words were, make sure historic buildings are protected. They are protected now, but a further protection for them would be that if they're a significant building contributing to the historic district, then if they could not be torn down and you get an incentive fifth floor.
I think yes, and if you talk to the HPC board, I think it would be helpful for them to understand what that means.
Yep.
Probably, you can send definitely a memo, and you can coordinate that with Jaime, and pretty much so they can get caught up in what the proposals are. So that'll be helpful. So if you don't mind, just keep going through the comments, please.
Okay, your next comment for the overlay district was the Croton Avenue part of the overlay district. And I think the key thing there is that you are not comfortable with a fourth floor, with a bonus there. And so if you we check this, we do feel that, yes, that's a policy call by the Board of Trustees. We think that we've given people something of an incentive to opt in any case, because we're making the zoning code, as Simon mentioned earlier, a little more flexible in the overlay district to allow residential on Croton Avenue on the ground floor. It's not allowed on the ground floor now. So there'd still be an incentive, perhaps won't be as great to opt in without the fourth floor, but we understand that was always something when we internally discussed the overlay district among ourselves. We raised, we went into the pros and cons of that question, and I think your comments helpful that you're more comfortable keeping to the three-story. So we don't have any, we didn't have anything to add there on Croton Avenue. That's a policy call, and I think.
Thank you. Something that I think you forgot to mention, and I believe was in the memo, and Dana and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the decision making in regards to the additional bonus on the fifth floor will have to be on the special permit that will have to come in front of the village board itself. That was another condition that we had, believe we did include it in there.
You may have. I didn't see it.
It's in there.
It's under downtown.
Oh, sorry. Oh, it's in the downtown. I'm sorry. I was on the Croton Avenue part. I'm sorry, Manny. Could you say that again, in the downtown? Just so I
in the downtown, it's pretty much, you said it was a conditional approval. We, at least the majority, the three of us will feel that it will be a special permit that will fall under this.
Yeah, that's your call. If it's a special
it
permit,
will come to the village board, and then the village board will make that decision if the fifth floor is, something that is suitable or not. And then obviously we'll go through all the channels that it has to go through.
May I just raise something with regard to that, just if I can, a process issue. Currently, the special permit, particularly with regard to the waterfront, is awarded by the Board of Trustees, with the density issue decided by the planning board. It's obviously your call. The reason I raised this is that for a developer, until they know that they're going to get the density bonus, they're not going to really be able to have a site plan, because the site plan depends upon knowing that they're going to get density. That's why when it comes before the planning board, it's all there as one thing after the special permit has been awarded. In this case, what I believe is being suggested is that the Board of Trustees would decide the density, but you'd be deciding the density, you'd be putting the developer in a position of essentially asking for density, and it may completely throw whatever plans out that he has because he's not before the board yet. And also he may still have to go before the zoning board. So I just, in terms of a process, the special permit is one thing, but if the board also wants, which it can, obviously, to give that authority to itself to grant the density, that could potentially create issues for developers in terms of how they put their site plan together, because they won't be allowed to go. There's no basis for them to go to the planning board because their site plan, you may deny it, and then they're going to have to have a completely different site plan. So I just want, I'm sure you may well have thought about that. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Stuart. We started talking about that and what would that mean, the impact of that, but we can definitely have a deeper conversation in that. But for now, our suggestion was for them to fall under the special permit category. So, but yes, thank you, Stuart.
Okay. Just want to make one point. Special permit does not mean that you grant the density, because you don't do that with regard to the planned waterfront. So that would require a significant change overall.
Correct.
Okay, so in other words, you're just saying for this one zone, you want
Correct.
not only special permit, but also to grant density?
That's a conversation that we need to have, and that's probably,
Okay.
again, there's a longer conversation. For now, our suggestion was to fall under the special permit because of what the downtown looks like.
Understood.
But we can, obviously, if there's something that, to me, if it's a bigger picture, then something, I guess we can talk about it, and that could change, if anything. But, for now, our advice was pretty much to keep it as for a special permit.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, great. And then on Croton Avenue, I think we understood your.
Yeah, that was fine.
Yep, keep it at 3 stories rather than 4.
Right.
I think the greatest greatest number of comments, I think, were really on the T district, where you're saying you did agree that a 2-family district ought to allow 2-family house by as of right. And I think that is easy to explain to everyone and what would normally be expected. So, and I think you were saying that you definitely did not agree with the 3-family units as conditional use permit, and you did not agree with 1 off-street parking space in the front yard. So it leaves a little bit, well, let me jump to the S75 and come back to a thought for you. We had one response there. And the S75, you said that the only revision you concurred with was to reduce the side yard and minimum driveway side yard setback. I'm trying to just quote you there. One thought we discussed this afternoon internally, is if you're willing to do that in the S75 district, which is a lower density district than the T district, to be consistent. I mean, if you look at, as a zoning person, I kind of look at bulk regulations at the back of your code in a schedule. If you reduce the side yard and minimum driveway side yard setback for the S75, you might want to consider that for the T zone also, because the T zone also has the very same lot size, the 7,500 square foot lot size. And if we reduce the side yard, and Simon had a chart on that, instead of the current side yards, I believe we're recommending 8 on one side yard and a combined of 20. So that gives you an 8-foot side yard on one side and a 12-foot on the other. If you were okay on that in the S75, you would be being consistent to be okay on that in the T zone. So that was one thought we had, just picking up on what you were comfortable with.
So let me jump in on this, and anybody else that has a different opinion, I guess they can say it as that as well. We were responding to what it was presented to us.
Right.
In the charge that you sent with the S75 district, it only reflected pretty much 3 variances in that one. So the minimum width, the side yards, and the impervious coverage of this particular zone. I did not have that opportunity to send an additional items that I'm still working on it. I'm almost done. And that was actually my question to you guys is, obviously we have the same challenges on the T-zone, and you're correct. When people are trying to do an addition in the back or putting a deck, so why can we reduce the size on that one as well? But I don't know if that will match the S75s that you have in there, because right now the minimum side yards for a T-zone is 8 feet. And right now the proposed for the S75 is 8 feet. So if we match in the S75s to the T-zones, we're already doing that. We already have that in place. We'll have to reduce that in a different ratio. Sure, you went with pretty much, I guess, I don't know, what was the ratio that you guys were doing in here? Was it you, Jaime, that calculated a ratio, or was it Frank or Simon? Jonathan?
What you perhaps one thing is Simon just put up on our slide, and there's a red dot near the second to the last line on the slide. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Your current requirement is a 12-foot side yard on one side in the T-zone and a combination of 28 feet for the 2 side yards. So you would have 12 feet on one side, and you'd end up with, what's that, 16 feet or so on another side. That is, that's unusually high for a 2-family zone. And if you were willing, what we're saying, Manny, if you were willing to reduce the side yard setbacks in the S75, one could, if you look at the chart in the back of the zoning code, and I'm sorry, I don't have that chart. I have the chart right here in hard copy. It would be consistent in a higher density zone not to have larger side yards than you do in your single family zone. Do you see, does everyone see?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And so it's my apologies, because the charge that you guys send out, it seems to have that information in there, but it's not in red. So I dismissed that one. And I didn't see that, and I should have checked myself with our zoning code. So it's my mistake. I didn't see that. Me personally, I do agree with that. Again, that's just me. I'm not sure if the rest of the board, the majority of the board, will agree with that. But yes, yes, please.
Yeah, and to answer the real quickly the questions you asked me about the numbers, when we were initially looking at this, we were looking at potentially changing the S75 district to the S50 bulk designations. That's where the 8 and 18 came from, versus the recommendation that came in for the T district is 8 and 20. So that's why you do see that discrepancy. Obviously, there were some changes that didn't make sense when the recommendations came out for the S75. The biggest being the width, not the width, but the actual square footage of the parcel. In order to avoid any potential subdivisions, we didn't want to make parcels smaller than what was currently permitted, and that's why the recommendations came out that way. But yeah, for the most part, the S75 district and the T district have the exact same bulk requirements. They're identical, essentially. The only difference is that one allows 2 families and one allows 1 family.
Yeah, and that one.
I have it up if you'd like to see it. I do have the worksheet.
I think we've already agreed that
Great.
we're moving on.
Yeah. So those finish the. I think the comments from the 3 trustees that from Dana and Manny and Robert.
There was also no auxiliary units, which I don't think you mentioned. You mentioned the parking, but not the auxiliary units. I don't think. I didn't hear it.
That was not part of this. I think.
Oh, that was part of the other one. Okay.
The DGIS.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, Yeah, just to be clear, there was a question at the bottom of the memo we received. Are accessory apartments in MF3 zones still proposed? And the answer is no, they're not. We have not put anything on the MF3 zone before you or on accessory apartments. And in fact, my memo we sent to you gave you an example. We think on accessory apartments, actually it's wise to wait because now that Peter Harcum has introduced this potential legislation into the New York State Assembly and Senate, we might be best, you might want to just wait on that and see what they do at the state legislature. There may or may not be any money associated with it. And it may be, it may be something you're not interested in, but it might be good to just put it on hold and not do anything. We have not proposed anything, nor have we ever proposed any text on the accessory units. So they're not before you unless someone else has written something. And
They were discussing the comp plan, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, they were just.
That's part. Yeah, that's part of the DGIS, and it's part of the comp plan, and there's also.
Yeah, so
part
Manny,
of the
let me
presentation, it is part of the document. Yeah.
Let me explain it very briefly and quickly. The comp plan can have ideas in it and suggestions. You don't have to act on them. They're just ideas for the future. It doesn't bind you as a board to act on it in the future. On the other hand, though, it does make it easier if you or another board, let's say a year from now or 2 years from now, accessory units, for some reason you want to do them in a certain way and you've got money from the state, that's already in your comp plan. So you don't have to bother putting it in the comp plan. But being in the comp plan does not mandate you to do anything. New York's a permissive planning state. So, but again, I just wanted to be clear on it so that you all understand that the comp plan is sets the table of ideas that you might consider in the future. It doesn't mandate you to do anything, and it doesn't preclude you from doing anything.
And you're correct, Frank. I mean, as we know, the comp plan from 2009 had a lot of ideas, and through the years, nothing has worked.
Right.
My concern is those ideas don't bring benefits to us. Some other people may disagree with that, So I would like to have, and I don't know if we can do that tonight. Again, it's going to be 9 o'clock already. So when we talked about the DGIS and the concept of the comp plan and what is presented as a part of the potential different ideas, that will be a discussion that I would like to have in regards to those. And I'll send back some of the comments in there. The other thing that I want to bring up that I want you guys to think, and I'll send some additional documents with that and for the rest of the board, as a part of the downtown district, the overlay district, that is not making a change, is more like you put in what we already have in the code in regards to parking, where we have the 1.5s and 1 1/4 spaces, which I know is a ratio. I did find other municipalities that have a different ratio. So I want you guys to keep this in mind. I'm not going to go into the details on that one, but I'll send a memo out to you guys and to the rest of the board and to the staff in regards to, we should, I think we should start looking into modifying some of this stuff and making some changes in that regard. So I just wanted to say that now, but I will be sending a part of a letter or an email, and I'll send some supported documents in that as well. So.
Thanks, Manny. I just want to note for the record that accessory dwelling units, after the research that I've done and the conversations that I've had with BFJ, are an idea that I'm in favor of. And so there's at least one person that not for now, but for the future. So my argument would be keeping it in the comprehensive plan for future consideration, since there's at least one person who finds it an interesting idea.
Totally understandable. Thank you, Omar.
And then, Mayor, we should go to your letter, I think.
No, I don't think so, because I think most of it is
All right, yeah.
covered.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with it. I think
Great.
the comprehensive plan part, I don't add. I think the last paragraph of my email, I'm not going to read it out, is that I have a fundamental issue with looking at buildings and not people. I really do think there is, beyond zoning, there's a humanistic approach to zoning that is not about footage and yardage and all that stuff, but rather to look at the people who own the real estate, who they are. There's been commentary about possibly a registry, because I think that many of these units in the single home, two family, have been turned into essentially businesses, and we're not going to be able to build our way out of the issues that we have by adding more here and adding more there, and also damaging the environment, and putting it in only certain parts of the village, because we're not looking at the people, we're looking at yardage. And I think that's fundamentally an issue for me, um, because of the way zoning is viewed, and those are the parameters. So I want to, and I've talked about, if your problem is that you want people to fix their home, Pat Yost talked about, on behalf of the team that put it together, I don't mean to point just to Pat, he's the speaker on behalf of a working committee, and you know, the people need to invest. And I made it, you know, we had another meeting, there have been lots of meetings that we've attended in whole or in part, and that you need to know who's actually owns the buildings and what the purpose is. If you've turned them all into businesses, but the legal system sees them as homes, when in fact, the more people you can fit per square foot in a business, the more you make. You have to sort of think, I think, a little bit more about that. So I'm going to, I think, just sort of run some ideas by you guys about how to approach that without derailing this conversation, because in government, if every time one of us has an idea, whether it's a member of the public or an elected official, we would never get anything done, because every time we move somewhere, somebody derails the process. So I don't want to derail a process. I've been doing this long enough to know that that's not smart. I will comment again for the record, and Frank, you're like 100% right. It's a plan. We have lots of initiatives that have plans. The problem is that usually when the public looks at plans, they actually think that if it has our names on it or their names on it, that that plan means that because there is ink on paper, that that's what the trustees approved. That's what a committee approved. That's what you follow. Like if I worked at IBM and there was a 3-year plan, I'd have to follow that 3-year plan. That's what IBM does, but that's not actually how government works. It's a plan. Did you say something which I thought was very clever? I just want to make sure I repeat it correctly and give you credit for it, that it's just like a table of things, right? You're laying
Yeah,
out a
you're setting
table
a
of the
table.
opportunities. You're setting it out. Doesn't mean you have to use it all. And I
That's
wouldn't
right.
say it exactly the way Manny did, that the 2009, a lot of things didn't work and we didn't, and not us, boards after us and this board didn't do it. It's because they didn't want to. They didn't think that was done in 2009. And it took, I think, 4 or 5 years back then to put, because it was such a long time before they did, you know, that plan. Those folks worked really, really hard on putting a plan together, like, you know, Herculean effort, frankly, much more intense than what we're going through. And some of the ideas just didn't work 5 years later, 7 years later. Maybe some of them should have been looked at. But there are people that think that because it's a plan, it's in writing. Because I have sat at, and you've heard me say this, and all of you have heard me say this, I've sat at land use board, and some developer walks in and goes, it's in your comp plan from 2009 that what you want is more density, and what you want is this, and what you want is that. And not really, actually. That wasn't what was, that's not actually the zoning. That's just in the plan of many years ago. Some things are and some things aren't. And I think that actually in government is very confusing for the public and very confusing for people who sit on the boards. You're 100% right, but that idea is oftentimes misunderstood, or I think that people just don't get it, that just because it's ink on paper doesn't make it a law and doesn't make it so. And I just want to say that for the record, because I think it's a very important point that you made, and it has to be navigated correctly, and the public has to be educated to difference between legislation, plans, ideas, and all the other stuff, because it's all in writing and it all looks the same. Anyway, I'm going to look at some of the ideas that I think are not in line with the way government functions and not necessarily in line with the way zoning and planning works and the expertise that we have. but I do think we need to look more at people and not just at buildings. I'm okay with everything. I don't like a 40 to 60% pervious, and I get the whole parking that you have to do it. I'd rather be more clever and use something else because it's really bad for the environment. And most of the village, no matter where you live, you are living, if you look at a aerial shot, we're like on the side of a cliff over here. You know, we're like the Hudson Valley. All water goes down to the Hudson. That's the whole point of the topography. And it's really important the kind of products that we use, but I think that could be put in later. You know, the 40 to 60%, you could probably then have the EAC say, well, yeah, but it can't be this kind of concrete. It has to be bricks with grass, whatever it is. So I'm okay with everything, as my colleagues have said. So I think we're good for today.
Yeah, and I just want to suggest the next step that we probably should take that memo in our discussion just now on what the trustees would like in terms of the zoning and get you back to revised zoning, you know, prior to March 3rd, so that you have what you have as best we can do. What you know, we respond to your comments.
Okay.
Okay, great.
What do we need to do, Stuart? Tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
This.
Tonight, there's nothing you're going to do tonight. There will be resolutions on the 3rd. There is one thing I did want to discuss with the board. The resolution on the 3rd, which I actually have prepared, will accept the DGEIS and schedule a public comment period.
Okay.
I did not include in that resolution that it would include a public hearing. We already have public hearings with regard to the comprehensive plan and the zoning text amendments. Sometimes when you put all three on, the difficulty is knowing what comments are being made with regard to what. And that is important in terms of what is actually shows up. So that's why it's not directly in there. That does not preclude you from having a public hearing. Indeed, the resolution as I drafted it leaves you with that ability to do that. So I just mentioned that to you. It's not something you have to decide at all tonight, but I do, you know, just want to put that, you know, in the back of your minds. One other thing, and Frank, this sort of goes to the timeline, and I apologize because I should have caught it. Under our code, and I believe it's actually under state law, with a zoning text amendment, it goes to the planning board. They then send it back with a recommendation to the BOT. And the BOT then holds a public hearing. So theoretically, the public hearing on the 31st, we may, or I don't know if we'll have the planning board's recommendations then. If we don't, that public hearing on zoning will probably have to wait. I'm not saying the comprehensive plan does, but the zoning one will probably have to wait because we're going to need those that get the recommendations, come back here, and then notice the public hearing based on that. I just wanted to point that out so we're consistent with our own code.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine. And I think as long as you have the hearing on the plan, we'll be within the state law requirement, so we're okay.
But otherwise, Mayor, what we'll have is resolutions on the 3rd to accept the DGIS, schedule the public hearing, and also to do the referral to both the planning board as well as the county planning commission. So those will all be before the board next week.
Great.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may ask one question.
Yeah, sure.
So in regards to the resolution for next week, in regards to the accepting the DGIS the way it is right now, and this question goes to the board. So are we okay? And I know this is just a draft, and I know this opens the public discussion. But just keep in mind, on the draft, we do have the accessory apartments and the MF3 zones as a part of the draft itself. Is that something that, are we okay adding those two items as a part of the DGIS? And then depending on what we have, I mean, we already stated that we don't want accessory apartments. And I know it's just part of a plan. We don't have to act on it, but is that something that we feel comfortable that should be actually written into the DGIS?
By the way, just so the board knows, we're completely at ease here, or kind of neutral as to what that says in the DGIS, because neither accessory units nor the MF3 are before you as zoning. You haven't proposed them.
So if you'd like, you know, we could just take mention of both of those out of the DGIS if you're more comfortable. They were there just in the case that you wanted to do them when we put them in. So we can take both of those out if you want. It's your policy call. We're comfortable either way.
I'd like them removed, I think, because
Yep.
otherwise you're going to get comments on things that we don't want to do. What's the point? You know?
That you're not planning to do, yeah. So that's fine. We can take references to both. Manny, if I understand, you take a reference to both accessory units out and also the MF3.
I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in my comments on the comp plan talking about the MF3. So, but I don't see the point of including things that we're just not, you know, supporting.
I think
Why
the
don't we
one thing
take-
I would add is naming that the board at this point, there are at least 3 members that don't support it. But there is one who does, who is me. I'm by my lonesome here, but I may not be in the future. And so, Frank, if you could just talk about the benefits and drawbacks of not including it.
Yeah, the two are different. Right now, what the EIS says about the MF3, and particularly it's important in Chapter 6, is that the MF3, if it's ever considered by any future board, needs its own sinker documents. That is, the MF3 has not been analyzed in the current DGIS. And the state law just says, hey, if there's something in the comp plan and you're considering something in the future, say what has to happen, and we do. So if we take the MF3 out of the, actually though, we could still take it out. You're not going to consider it, so we can take it out of the DGIS. On accessory units, what we say is a little different. The MF3, if it were considered, as it's written now, could have environmental impacts on transportation in the school system. The accessory units would have less of an impact. When we go through that a little bit, it will have some impact because, but because they would be normally scattered throughout single-family zone areas, the traffic impacts would be also scattered. So they're not really that significant. But I think what we say there is just that. They would have almost no impacts on traffic and no significant impact on the school system because they're small units and they'd be controlled that way. So one does have an impact. If you ever moved on an MF3, that's going to have a significant environmental impact. We say that, we say it has to be separately analyzed. On the accessory units, we say what's been talked about so far, they're limited in size and they're they're going to be smaller units. They would be scattered throughout single family areas. They're not going to have that significant of an impact, but we can take, this is your call. I don't want to appear to, I think if I understand Manny right, he's concerned with the very mention of those in the DGIS. We're fine. Neither one of them is being proposed now. So I think we could take, we could take them out. However, if something came back, the accessory units came back, Omar, in another year or two, you would want to do, an environmental assessment form on those,
Right, so you could, I think there's a 4-to-1 board vote.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think,
Okay.
and the board has thought about this quite a bit. Dana's actually, not Manny, the one that discussed it and said that she also had discussed it previously. Each of us is actually, I can't speak for Bob actually. So 4-to-1, if the state legislature passes, then it will have to be revisited in a different way and it's a moot point. If it doesn't and another board wants to look at it, then it goes through its own process. I mean, in theory, we could put 100 other things on this, but I think there's a 4-to-1. It's not just a little bit of a majority, it's a 4-to-1 on this based on how we think this will roll out. We've received commentary about, I know you call this a small unit. It's in a village like ours, given the size of the real estate. This isn't like the town. These units are actually significant And again, going back to people and what the purpose of all of this is, and the car that will be needed and all the other stuff. So I think a 4-to-1 is a reasonable majority, and I think people have thought about it. We've been talking about this for quite a while. So I'd like to move forward with it.
Right.
At some point, we just have to move forward.
Okay, yeah, very good. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for
Okay, thank
bearing
you.
with us for
Thank you all.
until whatever time it is now, 9.
I have to find out what Sylvia has in her background. Sylvia, what's that background
Yes.
that I've been staring at this whole night?
It's Manhattan. It's
Oh.
a view from a boat, actually. I took a class in the harbor, in the New York City harbor.
Oh, you took a sailing class. Oh, well, that's great. That's not an easy body of water, actually, to do sailing on. That's a
Nope.
really tough undertows there. Wow, okay. I didn't even realize it was our famous city of New York. Thank you for sharing that. All right, folks. I'm sure you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I don't think that we're going to probably need you, right, Village Manager?
Thank you very much, our BFJ friends. Thank you for your time and effort. Next up on the agenda, we have Chief Sylvester, who will we will be talking about police reform and reinvention. So I will turn that over to Chief Sylvester.
Okay, I'd actually like to start before the chief speaks, because I want to frame the conversation. I actually asked Chief Sylvester. The board has 3 direct reports: a village manager, the attorney, and the chief of police. I had asked Chief Sylvester to come speak. We could have done this at a different meeting, but because we want to be transparent, we want to record, and all 5 of us need to be here, we thought that tonight was a good time to ask the chief about policing. I don't know if I would say more than that, but we have some questions. We've been reading, there's been a lot of work done by volunteer committees, a working committee for a number of months, of which Trustee Lopez Margheriti started as the mayor, and then I took over in January. And I know I've said this before, tremendous amount of work, a lot of depth, a lot of breadth. The chief is part of that committee, member of PBA, the trustees, the mayor, and members of the public, I think about 15. There was a consulting group, and I think the consulting group, at least Richard Brady, for some of you who are following us, is, I think, not in a panelist, but he's watching this tonight. So we wanted the opportunity to have all of us be able to sort of, after we've read the plan, and we've reread it, and it's been revised, and we've reread it, and looked at different and conversations with each other and different members, we are gathering information from all sources that we can get our hands on. Literally all sources, different members of the community, and I Google a lot, and written material and articles, and different groups of people, individuals, staff, and now I had reached out to the chief and said, I have a bunch of questions, and I think other members have a bunch of questions that are specific to policing. I don't know if it's about specific to the plan, but it's specific to policing and how it's done. So, Chief, I don't know if you want to start by saying a few things, but I had asked that we use a Q&A format so that we can get our questions answered tonight.
Sure. So primarily, I'm here to answer questions. I didn't come here to necessarily address the reform projects or anything that's in the draft report specifically. But before we start, a couple things I would like to say about the police department, the folks that work here. First and foremost, this reform project is near and dear to my heart, and I say that with good reason. Police reform, changing the way that we manage public safety in our community, is nothing new for me. It's nothing new for this department. In fact, the reason that I started here is in all likelihood, in all honesty, because of a local civil service list that brought me here. Right, the civil service process is what got me in Ossining as a local resident, but what's kept me here, and there have been plenty of opportunities for all of our staff to look in other places, is the ability to innovate, the ability to do things differently. This department has a very, very long history of leading the way in change in policing, and certainly there is much room to grow. every year, our goal at the end of the year is to look back and see what we did well and find out what we're going to do different next year. There's never a time when we have the luxury of sitting there and saying we do policing well, because it's never going to be good enough in any format. Our department responds to about 30,000 calls a year. That includes calls for service from the community, as well as directed patrols, which are handed down by supervision, where there are priorities that are generated both from our observation and from complaints from the community. Over the past 5 years, our crime rate has dropped by 26%. Our arrest rate has a corresponding drop. 61% of our arrests are the result of a dispatched call, community complaints. More than nearly 2/3 of our calls are the result of someone calling the police and asking us to respond. The majority of our calls are not police officers out looking for people to arrest, and be it that it's likely a result of bail reform. 3/4 of all arrests result in people being released with an appearance ticket. So I think that anytime we're looking at the police department and how things go here, it's important to have some context in terms of what the reality is of crime and enforcement in our community. And to that end, I've mentioned to the board a number of times, I intend within the next 2 weeks to publish my arrest study, which is going to show all of the data for all of our arrests for 2020. And we've continued compiling in 2021 in order to continue with a historical track to be able to see trends in enforcement, which is going to show every single arrest that's made in Ossining, to include demographics for race, gender, ethnicity, and we'll be able to track numbers of times people are arrested. Likewise, we are keeping track of who those folks are, but for purposes of this study, we won't be releasing names, because one of the things that is incredibly important to me is that we manage community expectations. And one of the things that seems to be very important to our residents, important to us too, is privacy. We want our residents, when they make a mistake, when they face arrest, to be able to rebound from those things. Our department is full of innovators, and I know that most people may see what we do on Facebook, and it seems a lot to be a novelty. And I know I've heard some of the comments, and sometimes they come from my own staff. There is no novelty to what we do. Our block parties, while we didn't advertise them, and they do seem like a lot of fun, and they're a party on the street, they're targeted efforts aimed at helping specific groups of people. We worked with the Ossining School District to identify the highest concentrations of underperforming students, and that's how we chose the locations that we worked in. At the locations, we worked with the Open Door, we worked with Feeding Westchester, we worked with the Ossining Public Library, we worked with a number of other local businesses and arts groups and things in order to bring resources to the people that live in those neighborhoods. We continue to want to do those things, and where we've heard a lot from police reform that people want more community outreach, we do too, and we look forward to getting back to all those things. This police department was first to roll out body cameras full-time. This police department was first in Westchester to use implicit bias training. We led the way in digital outreach. We are the first, I believe, in the country to have a fully Spanish language Facebook page in order to communicate with people, which has taken off like a rocket. So while we know there's a lot of work to do, and I'm glad to answer questions about what we do, I'm proud to work for this police department. I'm proud to be a part of this police department, and I'm proud to be a part of this community. I look forward to making even more changes to continue our upward trajectory. So glad to answer any questions the board has.
Thank you, Chief. Normally I go last, but I asked actually for you to come, and I'm going to sort of take my prerogative right now and go first, because I have 4 very specific questions, and then I will open it up to the rest of the group. I'm not sure the order is all that important, but I do want to get through my 4 macro questions. So as I read the plan that was done by the working committee, a bunch of light bulbs went off for me. There was no question of the amount of sharing and personal stories that were brought forth by members of the committee about their own personal relationship with police. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily Ossining police, sometimes it was Ossining police 20 years ago. A lot of pain, a lot of mistrust, and I think that it's fair to say that there's just a lot of pain that comes through in all of the focus groups that we did, and that people carry with them, and they carry with it for themselves, for their children, for their parents. And so sometimes it was just hard listening because it's really painful, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But I actually kept looking back at the executive order, and what came through for me is that I'm missing information that would be helpful for me as a one vote of 5 to put forward the final plan. One of them is that I know so little about. I need more explanation about is the police officers in our schools. I'd like to understand a little bit of the history, who manages the police, who actually makes decisions about the police being, whether they should be there or shouldn't be there. So if you can enlighten me on that, and then I'll go through my next 3 questions.
Sure. So the first question, I manage the police. So I send them when they go to the schools. The reality of police officers in schools is sort of an interesting evolution. Ossining's had police officers in the schools for about 30 years now. I believe I was in one. I know I was either first or second in John Girolamo's DARE classes back in the early 90s when we started that program. But police officers have been in the school since then. We've had a youth officer all that time. That was a little bit early for having a youth officer. I know that Westchester County was one of the early innovators in that program overall, with actually an Ossining resident being the first youth officer, I believe, in the country, in either Scarsdale or Irvington, I forget where. Nonetheless, our relationship in the schools is born of a few different things. Originally, it was to build relationships with students. Over the past 20 years, we've had more than 200 school shootings. So there's 2 components to this.
Before that gets out in the wrong way, not 200 school shootings in Ossining, correct?
No, we've never had.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'm just gonna, they're just in that one sentence, that didn't sound so good to me. So there's a couple of hundred school shootings in the United States.
Yeah, there have been more than 200 school shootings in America.
Okay.
Years. So a couple different things have come from that. First and foremost, our department has always appreciated being in the schools to build relationships with students. What we want is we want to have early connections with the residents in Ossining so that when they see a police officer, they learn about police on friendly terms. They understand that police officers are there to help. When they need something, they can approach us, and there's not a that wall's not there. There's no fear involved. And I'll tell you, from my experience in the schools, when we start with children in pre-K and kindergarten, and we're down in Park School, pre-COVID, it's high fives all day long, and kids really love to see police officers there. The objective is that the more time we spend in the schools, the more we become like a piece of furniture. They don't notice that police are there. Children don't say, why is there a cop in school? Adults say things like that because they're not used to seeing it. But we are a regular fixture in the schools. Both, we have a full-time youth officer assigned to the high school and one assigned to the lower schools. We have a unique school district, and then we have a bunch of buildings. We bounce between them. In addition to that, every officer is tasked with walking through every school in their sector every day. We want as many officers in the schools as often as possible in order to be building those relationships. Second to that, it is a public safety issue. All of the safety plans that are in place in our school district right now are a result of the partnership between our department and the school district. So the determination as to how much time cops spend in school, they're directly ordered by me. They work for me, not the school district, but it's absolutely a partnership between the school district, and certainly the school district has been supportive of that. And it's unique in comparison to some other communities in Westchester. There are places in Westchester where police officers are not welcome in the schools, and other communities have their reasons for that. We've had really great success with it, and the objective is that by the time students reach to middle school and high school years, where we may start seeing complications with people, it's easier to have conversations about, have good behavior and things like that. So.
Okay, but I want to be more specific. So I personally don't like guns. So if I am in an area where people wear guns or are in uniforms, that's not friendly to me. For me personally, I'm not talking about, everything you just said. I was under the understanding that it's actually the school board that makes decisions along with you. So because the village trustees don't actually make this decision. We make budgetary decision. The school board actually makes decisions. So theoretically, if the school board this year decided that for whatever reason, there was a public meeting, parents didn't want police in the buildings, that would be whose decision? Is it a police decision to have people at the facilities at all the schools, or is it the school board that makes a decision on behalf, and their elected officials too, on behalf of the buildings that they really are managing? Explain to me how that works a little bit.
Full-time youth officers that are assigned to the school is with an understanding from the district. They request that those officers be placed there. In all honesty, it is a full partnership where we really both have to agree, because if they demand a cop and we don't have staff, they don't get a cop. If they tell us they don't want us there, we have to have a hard conversation about what needs to get done. And we've had some of those conversations. It is the school district that requests to have full-time police officers there. The school district property is not sovereign property that can lock their doors and keep police officers out. Our officers patrolling through the schools, it's a public building, it's a place that we need to be. However, we're there because the school district is inviting and they're welcoming to us, and it's part of the safety plan that's been implemented over the years. So in terms of full-time officers in the school, that's really more of a school district request. But in terms of our presence in the schools, it's part of our ordinary day patrols, and it's something that we're directed to
Okay.
do.
And I appreciate that you're separating those two issues, because I know when we do budgets, you know, I would actually think that the Board of Education should pay those budgets, and they should, based on whatever's going on in the school district, should make decisions about the police. Mandy, did I interrupt? Were you asking something? I heard somebody's voice. All right, so that I appreciate that. The other thing that came through for me as I read not only this plan by the volunteers who spend a tremendous amount of time putting the plan together, gathering their information, but I've also looked at some others. Another thing that strikes me as something I need to understand more about and want to understand more about is the police academy. Explain to me who runs the police academy, the structure, all the way to the final decision maker, who they report to, and how police are trained. And in that conversation, as you explained to me, because that is where people get trained, as far as I understand, just the way doctors get trained in medical schools, and then they go out and do internship. Well, you know, there are periods of actually working in the field. Police get trained in academy. Can you explain to me that structure and how that works? In addition, what role does the academy play, if any, today, not what they should or what you'd like, but today, in making sure that diversity is being taught, how one handles oneself, issues of mental illness, all the stuff that one would think would be taught at an academy that produces police officers who go in the field?
The Westchester County Academy is run by the County Police Department. They have a commissioner. He answers directly to the county executive. Their curriculum is in large part designed by the New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services, but like most other things, Westchester County tends to be more progressive than the rest of the state. So at the police academy, they'll learn everything from firearms to arrest techniques. But in addition, I know that Westchester County also covers cultural competency. They do crisis intervention, all sorts of use of force, first aid, domestic violence, report writing, how to drive a car. They cover just about everything there. So in terms of the content that's covered there, first and foremost, it comes from DCJS, but second to that, then
What is, I don't know what DCJS is.
New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services.
Got it. Thank you.
Second to that, there is curriculum that gets, you know, there's committees among the police chiefs in Westchester County when they're going to add courses or take courses away, where the chiefs around Westchester County have the ability to have input into what's being taught during the academy sessions. But ultimately, those decisions come from county police as they manage the police academy itself. It's a scale of economy decision there, in a sense that no other municipality, except for perhaps Yonkers or White Plains, maybe the larger cities, would really have the ability to train their own people full time the way we can all send our handful of recruits each session to be trained there. After the academy's over, people come back here for 3 more months. So they spend 3 months in the police academy. They spend 3 more months here of in-service training where they get one-on-one, hands-on, on the road and in the building training from a field training officer. Typically, at some point during that process, they'll be passed off to a second and sometimes a third field training officer for different specialty details. At the end of that field training, if we feel that they've completed and all the paperwork is complete to show that they've learned everything they need to learn and that they're proficient enough to be cut loose, they get released into general patrol. And usually supervisors have a more watchful eye over those folks. Each year, we then go through another 40 to 60 hours of in-service training. So that's the training.
So if we, because, you know, my lens right now, we have an opportunity to make changes right now, right? There are hundreds of municipalities handing in hundreds of plans to the governor. I'm not sure what he's going to do with all those plans. That was never made clear to municipalities, and I have tried to actually get that information from our state legislators. But I'm assuming they're going to gather all of this information, and there might be some stratifications where they see areas for improvement. So if we wanted to say, look, we would like the academy, the place that teaches police officer in unison, right? I mean, it's all of them except for maybe a couple of big cities. How would we have input into what the academy teaches in order to produce a cultural shift, a couple of courses on customer service? I'm not being funny. I'm just an example, a simple example. How would we do that? I mean, do you influence that? Do we influence that? How would we do that?
So I'm on the board of the Westchester County Chiefs of Police Association. So certainly I'm part of the conversation about what needs to be added to training around Westchester County. But if the board wanted to have some hand in that initiative, certainly you could approach the county executive on that.
Okay, so that's the path. That's great. I said 4, but I'm going to go with 3 because I feel like other people have questions. I know my colleagues have said they have questions, so I'm going to leave that. So I'm interested in hiring. So another way to really influence seismic changes that change culturally over time. Cultures don't change and behaviors don't change in 6 months. They change over time. If we wanted to influence that, how does one influence the hiring of people of color into the police?
So
where does that happen?
Police department hiring is run through New York State and then managed by Westchester County. It's a civil service process like every other job in municipal government. It is an exam. That exam is given once every 4 years. There's advantages and disadvantages to the length of those exams in a sense that if we gave the test every year, we would rarely get away from people that score 100 or 95. And oftentimes there's great candidates that score a 90 or an 85. I myself scored an 85 on the patrol exam many, many years ago.
So we should not have hired you. Is that what you're saying? I'm kidding.
Wonder myself every day. Yeah. So I lost my train of thought after that.
Sorry about that. A little levity. It's okay. You're talking about how you're hiring, that it's done at the county level, 85. You have to score higher than 85. There's the 3-person rule. You started talking about that.
Or higher than 85. The test is valid for 4 years. We reach as many people as we can within those 4 years. You can only select people in the top 3. The police officer exam is given and it comes in 5-point increments. So you can score a 100, a 95, a 90, an 85, an 80, and we rarely get below 80. The issue is that if you have 3 people who score 100 and you have 10 people who score a 95, the only people eligible in that first round are the 3 people who score 100. If one of them is selected or eliminated, and they can only be eliminated for cause. So there's not, the fact that you don't hire somebody doesn't remove them from the list. It merely leaves them there hanging out for next time. So if you end up with 2 people that score 100 and 10 people that are a 95, number 1 and 2 are the 100s and the 95s would be collectively number 3. That means that people that scored a 90 are going to be sitting there waiting for potentially years before they can be reached. It's a limitation of civil service, but at the same time, it creates an objective standard for hiring people. So there's advantages and disadvantages. The real hindrance that we have right here, right now, is that this test given every 4 years is announced with very little notice, and the sign-up period is incredibly short. I know because I got notice through Westchester County Chiefs that this test is going to be announced very, very soon. And the period to sign up will be 29 days. So here's the deal. If you're a cop, you know when the test is, you're going to tell all your friends to sign up. They're going to sign up and take the test. If you're not someone who's tracking civil service exams, and that's most young people, you're not going to know about this exam. You're likely going to miss it. And I know tons of incredible people who really could have used the job that never saw the sign up. And if you really want to know why family members end up in civil service jobs, it's because family members tell them about when the test is and other people don't know the secret password to get within that period. And some people will say 29 days is plenty of time. It's not. Now, 4 years ago, we did a fairly robust recruiting program and it failed. We recruited more than double the number of candidates from 4 years prior to that, and the demographics did not change. We're going to make some changes this year. We're partnering with the Guardians, which is the Black law enforcement organization in Westchester County, the Westchester Hispanic Law Enforcement Association, New York Women in Law Enforcement. We've reached out to the Gay Officers Action League from New York City. We have all sorts of allies in this that we're looking to work with in order to recruit to all of the underrepresented populations in our community. But the reality is that we have this much time to make the impact that we need to make. And it is going to be incredibly difficult. So we'll be relying on all of our friends and neighbors to tell everyone they know. And the reality is that people that want to be cops all know when the test is because they're tracking this. But the problem we really have in law enforcement is some of the best people that we can hire are people that have not considered this yet as a profession. We have a number of people that are here that really weren't dead set on being cops and turned out once they got here to be some of the most well-rounded people we have. Some of my best officers are people that weren't bent on this job. So we're really looking to find all those folks that maybe aren't sure about where they're going, or maybe they're not positive this is job for them, but we want them to be able to take a chance, because the real underlying issue here is that if you miss that exam and you change your mind next year or the year after or the year after that or the year after that, we can't hire you. So if you don't get in the next 29 days, that's a wrap until 2025. So it's a real problem. It's something that the county chiefs has taken on every single year with civil service. It's not only for the hiring process, it's the same issue for promotion exams. Before this call, I was looking through some old exam announcements, and the 2014 lieutenant's exam was 3 weeks you had to sign up for that.
So it's the timing, and it's run by the county. So to affect change, we will have to address that window of opportunity and the lack of access to minorities or people of color, because unless you're in the family, unless you're already in it, it's very difficult for you. And if you're in college and you're tracking another career path, unless your family is in it, you probably, so you may not get a lot of college kids, because there's probably not a lot of recruiting going on over there. I'm speaking like of something I don't know. If I knew all this stuff, I wouldn't have invited you to this meeting. I'm just running, this is a work session. So I'm just trying to get my hands on this to have a clear understanding, because this has popped up as a real issue.
I'm sitting here now because when I was 20 years old, somebody handed me an application, and on that date I said, "Why are you giving that to me?" He said, "You're going to be a cop." And at that time I had no intention of becoming a police officer. There are a lot of people out here that need that talk. And with 29 days to do it, it is going to be very hard, not only to reach all those folks, but then to lead them to the point where they think themselves through, they reconcile their thoughts, and come to the conclusion that they should take this. So, you know, that's really the hard part. So we're going to be doing things like, we've got a computer terminal set up in our lobby because it is an online application only. There are no paper applications to the best of my knowledge. So we're going to have a computer terminal in our lobby here where people can come sign up 24 hours a day. We're going to be putting out some videos. We're going to be making announcements every single day. People will be sick of hearing from us 29 days after this thing gets announced. But the reality is that if someone says, many 20-year-olds put things off for later, and they say, "I'll get to it later," and 29 days pass, and oops, they forgot, and 4 more years goes by before we can consider those people for hire. So we can only hire the people who take and pass the exam. We need people to sign up and take the exam in order to adjust our demographics to appropriately reflect our community.
So those were my questions. I appreciate my colleagues letting me go first. I usually do the roundup at the end. So I'm going to thank you, Chief. These are, again, things that came through for me personally as I read the plan that was submitted, because I think a lot of the conversations was about demographics and meeting the needs of a community and how do people get access. And this has been, for me, very helpful. So thank you for your time. I'm throwing this out to the board. I don't know who wants to speak next. I'm looking at the gallery to see who wants to speak next.
It looks like Bob is trying to speak. Bob, you have to unmute your mic.
Okay.
Are you Bob? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Real quick, just to fall back on that, Chief. The 4 years, you missed 4 years. That could hurt people at a potential age, correct? Is there an age out on this test?
Yeah, so you've got to be less than, I believe it's 36 years old on the date of the exam. So certainly if you're at, if you're in your 30s and you miss this exam, you don't get another bite at the apple.
Right. So you age out. That's all. That's all. I just wanted to get that out there. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So I have 2 pieces. One following up on what the mayor was asking about the test. So if I understand what you're saying, Chief, the idea is one of the rationales for having it every 4 years is that if it were every year, then people would get essentially that good at the test, and you would have too many people that have too high a score, and you wouldn't be able to differentiate scores. Is that right?
No, I'm sorry. Maybe that was unclear. I love high scores. I have scored much higher on all my promotion exams. I promise you of that. No, the reality is this. It's a double-edged sword. So if you were to give the test every year, then you'd never reach anybody except for the people that score 100. And the exam renews every year. So you take the test. So first of all, you'll sign up for this exam. You'll take it a couple of months later. Sometimes it takes 6 months to get your grades back. So there's this long delay. And by the time you get those back, sometimes people have taken other jobs or moved on or moved away. But the reality is that the 4 years allows us enough time to work our way down that list. Because in a place like Ossining, where we hire, 1 year we hired 5 people, some years we hire 0, but in most years we're hiring, 2 or 3 cops a year is pretty average for us. If we're hiring 2 or 3 cops and we want to make sure that we're getting jobs out to the people in the community and that we're reaching everybody, if that test were taken every year, you're going to have to be constantly taking a test in order to do that. By letting the list settle for a little bit, we'll reach some people that, and again, we're looking at a relatively narrow scope here in a sense that you have people that are from 18 to 35, and you have to be 20 and a half, I think, on the day you graduate the academy. So you can take the test at 18, but you can't get hired for a couple of years. So you really have 15 years worth of age where you're eligible for the job. If we gave the test every year and you don't score 100 and you score a 95, which is a good grade, we may not reach you. And that's unfortunate. So the idea is that you want to balance the length of the exam in order to reach the most people possible and make sure that you're getting good candidates without, there does come a time towards the end of the exam where in certain testing years we've said, hey, we've really exhausted the candidates that we really want from this exam. We're looking down this and just nobody here is really getting me excited about bring them on. They don't seem like people that are going to really fit with our culture. So maybe we hold off on hiring till later, or whatever your reasoning may be that we're not hiring right now. And there are times where I've heard other jobs say, hey, we're stuck and we don't really want the people that are there, and we have to wait for the next test to come around. So it's a squeeze between taking it too often and never being able to reach anybody, or letting it last too long and getting stuck with people that maybe aren't your ideal hires.
Thank you. And how does local hiring versus people that aren't from the community coming from the list, is there any preference one way or another? How does that work?
Sure. So we have a local preference list. Not every community uses that. In Ossining, if you take the exam and you sign up with an Ossining address, you'll be delivered to us on a local list. So the people that we hire are only people with addresses here. And you have to then confirm that you live here at the time of hire too. So if you take the test and you move away, you have the option to reestablish. But if you don't come back, you can't own a home here, move away, and still be on our list. You've got to be part of Ossining when you come here. So it's a great advantage for making sure that we're getting jobs to local people. Again, double-edged sword, because are all of the best candidates only people that live in Ossining? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it would be great to be able to look countywide, but it's the same struggle. The folks that go countywide say, I really wish I had a local list so that I could narrow down to just my people. The folks that have a local list sometimes say, boy, I wish I had, a more broad perspective here and be able to hire everybody. So advantages and disadvantages. I'm a product of a local list. I think it's a great thing. Some of the best moments in my career have been being able to hire local people and someone that grew up here and is giving back to their community, and then to be able to watch them go out on the street and really do their thing. So I like the local list.
So it's you have to choose one. It's either a local list or a county list. Got it.
So you can start with the local list, and if you get to a point where you either have no one left or you just say, look, there's 2 more names and we don't think they're suitable for us, you can then switch to the county list at some point. But once you go to that county list, you cannot go back. So you can't go back and forth. And if you start with the county list, you stay there. So there is an option to change, but it's unusual that we do that typically, because at least in my tenure, we've had a lot of people from Ossining taking the test. So we've never been without names.
And are transfers basically the only way then that people from outside of Ossining come in?
Correct. So if you transfer, you can come from out of town. Even the transfers we've taken oftentimes are people that are from here. We do get resumes. Social media has led to resumes coming from all over the place, and we've seen some really unusual ones. Sometimes people that we can't even, wouldn't be able to consider. But typically, that's our route to getting out of towners. But oftentimes, there are police officers from other jurisdictions that live here.
So I have 3. That was number 1. Number 2 is I appreciate the mayor's question about school resource officers, and the report that you sent, or the memo that you sent, that gave feedback on all of the suggestions in the draft plan. One of the pieces that wasn't in that draft plan that I'd like to hear your thoughts on is on the school resource officer piece. Specifically, if you can address one of the thoughts that I have heard, which is that having officers in the schools can perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. Can you speak about that?
It can. And a lot of what we do has potential to be harmful. But the reality is that there's an awful lot of trust you have to put in somebody to become a police officer. You give somebody a gun and the ability to take people's rights, and that requires an immense amount of trust to put folks out on the road. Part of that is putting them in the schools and trusting that they're doing the right things with our students. We pick the best qualified people to do those jobs, specifically that we have Ed Walker working in our schools, who started his career working with youth in juvenile homes. He then went on to be a longtime employee in recreation here in Ossining. He's in the Ossining High School Sports Hall of Fame. I don't know if there's anybody in Ossining that doesn't know Ed Walker. Our other youth officer, our school resource officer that works is Connor Tompkins. He came here after leaving work as a teacher. He's a lacrosse coach at the high school. And I hate to admit this, but he coaches football at Sleepy Hollow, which is like really frowned upon. But we'll take it for now. We're trying to get them back here. But we pick people that have experience with youth and teachers and children, and that's the reason that they're in those roles. They have education backgrounds, they have youth backgrounds, so it's really seeking to avoid that type of thing. If you've seen any of our reading programs or any of the things we do in schools, it sometimes makes you smile when people say stuff like that, because we know that's not really what's going on. Certainly there is potential that if managed the wrong way or improperly managed, you could certainly cause some adversarial relationships. But I think we've got a good relationship, and I think that begins with our relationship to the administration in the school district, the principals and the superintendent being supportive of what we're doing. I have to say, in the past 5 years, I have learned an immense amount about managing students in our school district from the time I've spent in Ossining High School with Stephen Hancock and the time I spend with Ray Sanchez, just to learn about how we can be better and the things we can do. I think there's a lot more we can do in the schools. I think that doing less is not the answer. I think doing more is the answer in order to really prevent that from happening. I've said time and time again that if you want to fix relationships and you want to have good things happen, it's not going to result from separating cops and community. It's going to be from putting us in the room together and figuring out where we stand. The times that we push into school, to classrooms in the high school, I did a few of them this semester myself, and talk with students, and we get to answer some of their questions and take away some of the mystery that surrounds the uniform. It really starts to make people more comfortable, and that's where the relationships really start to get built. That's the benefit.
Got it. Thank you. The last piece for me is we don't often have you speak without kind of a specific prompt or something to speak about. And one of the things that I'd like to hear about are, you mentioned, and I forget exactly what you called it, but the arrest report. What was that called?
So I don't know that I have a catchy title for it right now. I'm doing a data study on all of our arrests in Ossining, and what it's going to show is going to be all of the demographics for our arrests for 2020. Unfortunately, our records management system doesn't give sufficient data to be able to do a historical look back. We can get some data from it, but we actually had to go back and hand sort all of our arrests from 2020 in order to get all of the data we're looking for. So what I'll be publishing is a report that's not only going to include in list form every single arrest that took place with the type of law, the section of law, the level of offense, the age, the gender, the race of every single defendant arrested in Ossining. But then we're going to show ratios in comparison to different population surveys to see how they line up with different measurements of where we expect whether people are overrepresented or underrepresented in arrests. And the goal for this is going to be, this is our first effort towards, some transparency stuff. There's some other stuff coming down the road after that, but the goal for this is to be able to show people year over year. So this is something we're going to publish for 2020 that I'm done. We're in the editing phase now. This particular project kind of helped me up, but we want to put that out, and then every year thereafter. So there'll be a historical look back, so that in 2022, we can look back at 2021 and 2020. The following year, we'll have another year, and every year thereafter, we'll be able to have this. And it's not an effort to convince anybody of anything. It's an objective look at what we have going on here. But I also found it was a great opportunity for us to try and say, hey, here's our most popular arrests. The things we found from this study, our highest number of arrests are for driving with a suspended license, DWI and all the alcohol related offenses, and an awful lot of violation of an order of protection. And there are resources that we can deliver to this community and partnerships we can form that can really address those things. So to that end, we're going to look to try and do some education on how important it is to just resolve your tickets, not for the police department's benefit, but because driving with a suspended license is a misdemeanor, but it always results from somebody getting pulled over for some other underlying offense. So we can take those traffic stops and instead of turning them into arrests, help people to find a way to resolve those tickets before it gets to a suspension so we don't end in arrests. And by that way, look, it's a crime prevention mechanism, but it's done by solving the underlying behavior. So we're not just going to throw out arrests, but we want to actually fix the behavior and get people to a point where they don't have to drive with the anxiety of, oh, I didn't pay my ticket and oh no, here comes a cop, right? We want to fix those type of things. So that's the type of stuff we got from the arrest study. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting that out because I think it's very telling about crime and Ossining and what goes on here. One of the things you'll find, I think we had one marijuana arrest last year. A lot of people believe that, that's a big driver in law enforcement. Certainly there were a handful of people that were charged with marijuana possession as an underlying offense to something more serious because the study's only going to show your highest level offense. But independently arresting people for marijuana, 1 in 2021. So I think it'll be surprising to a lot of people to see what the charges that have come through our department are. But I think it's good for people to know exactly what's going on in their community.
To clarify, you said 2021, but that's 1 in 2020.
Sorry, 1 in 2020.
Yeah.
2021, I don't know what we've done yet. I'm tracking it, but I haven't compiled everything yet.
Got it. So would love to invite you back to present that when to the board and the community when that's ready to go. I'd love to know where that can be found, like where you're planning on posting it and if it'll be available in Spanish.
Yeah, you know what? I hadn't considered the Spanish thing, and I'm sure that we're going to be putting it out on both Facebook pages. So I'll have to talk to Detective Chavez about translating over for me. But yeah, I imagine we'll do it in 2 languages. Where it'll be published, we'll put it to all of our social media channels. The Village is welcome to put it up on the website and all the other places. I mean, I'd like this to be distributed as widely as possible. I think that the more people that see it, the better.
Thank you. That's all for me.
I have a question about hi, Chief. I have a question about the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board. And I know that apparently we have one of the few in Westchester, if not the only one.
The only one.
Only one. These are apparently exist more in big cities than they do in villages. I've been looking into this. And I also have noticed that actually a lot of the CPCRBs and other places do not have police officers on them, and they feel that it's important not to. And I just want to get a little bit of I want to find out a little bit about the history of how the CPCRB started and why it started, and then why the decision was made to run it as it's run.
So I love to take credit for all the firsts around here, but I did not start the CCRB. This has been around for a long time. This long predates my career. This was a Chief Burton thing that came around. I think they've been up and running for 25 years or so, maybe 30 at this point. They've been around for a long time. The idea behind CCRB is that it's an external mechanism to be able to review internal affairs to make sure that we are doing our job when it comes to investigating complaints against police officers. So the way it works is that a complaint comes in, it's turned over to my office, I assign an investigator to look into it, I deliver that investigation to the CCRB, they review it to ensure that everything is done properly. They then make a recommendation as to whether it should be founded, unfounded, unsubstantiated, or substantiated, unfounded, and founded. Those are hotly debated words, those 3 right there, the terms for that one. Nonetheless, and then there's a mechanism where if there is a dispute between my finding and their finding, that it can be delivered to the Board of Trustees as a Board of Police Commissioners. The placement of police officers on this board is really interesting. So like what Omar was saying about, couldn't police officers potentially pose a danger in the schools in the sense that we could create this school to prison pipeline? Sure. like I said there, everything you do with police officers poses, everything you do in life poses a risk, right? But the value to cops being there is this concept of peer accountability. Now, first of all, it's important to note that there are 5 civilian members and 2 police officers assigned. One is a supervisor, one is a line officer. So one's a patrol officer, one has to be a sergeant or lieutenant. It gives different perspective, and I'll get to perspective in just a minute, but the real value in them being there is that when complaints are delivered, these are folks that are, not only do they volunteer within our department to do this duty, but then they're appointed by the board in order to hold their peers accountable. And what we're really talking about here, a lot of what's been said throughout reform, not just here, but everywhere, is this concept of peer accountability. We can't rely on other people catching cops to do something wrong. We have to have a system where our police department is willing to hold our own accountable. And this is our opportunity to be different. I don't think this is a good fit for every municipality. I think we have an opportunity to be different. And I think it's an incredible opportunity. And I think that we should keep it and we should be the example to everybody else. This isn't about cops foiling the CCRB's plans, because in every single case, the civilian members have a supermajority. And I got to tell you, from my experience at the CCRB, I've never seen the cops disagree with the rest of the board. I think that every single complaint that I've sat in on has been unanimous, whether founded or unfounded. And I have seen complaints founded. So the police members have voted with them. So I don't think it's an issue of police officers undermining. I think some of the other value that they bring is that when you're discussing complaints, there is a long list of training that's required, but in reality, the training that those folks are getting is not the same depth of training that you're going to get as a police officer. They're not spending days and days in training and in classes. They don't have a constant in-service. It's a monthly meeting, and they go through a fair amount of training. But the reality is that when you do this all day, every day, you have a little bit of context you can offer. And what I've seen in my experience many times on the CCRB is where an event will present itself, and those officers are able to provide a bit of context to the members on the board that haven't been in that position and often have questions, not because they're trying to impose their will on civilian members, but because the civilian members will say, what am I looking at there? If you haven't done the job, often people aren't even sure what it is they're seeing. So I think that bit of context is good. And the last thing is the relationship building. So by having cops there and the civilian members of the community, being able to trust and learn that our police officers are in fact accountable and will hold one another accountable, I think there's an immense value there. So from my position, I support the police officers being there, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to be different. It's a great opportunity for us to stand out. It's a great opportunity for us to be the example. But I do acknowledge that it is a different model than what most other communities would have.
Yeah, I was going to say, you concede that it is a different model.
Absolutely. But we're also, I mean, in terms of different, the only other model in New York State, to my knowledge, that's active right now is New York City. So in terms of different, we're different for having it at all.
At all. Okay, thanks. You know, I know that you told me that there are 61 police officers on the force, right?
61 spaces. I think we've got 56 on right now. We've got some openings.
Is that the same amount as communities of a comparable size and crime rate and like Peekskill?
So our numbers are probably, yeah. I don't know how many Peekskill has. I know we're comparable to Peekskill. In terms of crime rate, I don't know our crime rate versus theirs. I'd have to check. We generally compare ourselves with like Peekskill, Port Chester. They seem to be similar type demographic and size municipalities. And to my knowledge, our numbers are, I think Port Chester's a little bit smaller. Peekskill might be a little bit smaller.
Peekskill, I think I saw 52.
Right. So 5 of our officers were added when we took over the town because we have dedicated positions that have to be filled out there. So prior to the town, we were staffed at 56.
Okay, that explains that you need extra for the town. All right. Can I ask one more question? Anybody else want to go? I'm sorry, I'm hogging the time.
I think you should ask the questions. This is one of our largest initiatives, and you know, this is a part of like getting a strong education. What's going on?
This pertains to use of force. When I was sitting in on the public budget meetings, there was a line item for the police for new tasers. And I don't think about tasers a lot, but I thought, how often are tasers used? And what, you know, what are the, when would those be used? And what are the, you know, people are now departments are saying, okay, you can't use this type of hold and you can't put the knee on the neck, you know, I mean, where do we stand in that whole thing?
Well, okay, there was a lot of questions right there.
Sorry.
We doing tasers, or are we doing chokeholds, or what are we doing?
I guess we're doing, I guess my idea, I'm trying to talk about use of force, I guess, and I am interested, like,
Let me
tasers used a lot, I don't know.
let me try this. Okay. So our use of force policy is more restrictive than all of the standards that New York State puts out. In fact, we're probably one of the more or most restrictive policies in Westchester County. It's a lengthy policy and it's complex, so I don't know that I can cover the whole thing right now. But I'll tell you that all of the 8 Can't Wait initiatives have been covered by our policy. In fact, we confirmed that each of those, the language from those is actually taken right from the 8 Can't Wait website. So, you know, we amended policies. Some of them were just small tweaks. Some of them were already in place. Some of them were things we added over the summer. But we do comply with all the strictest regulations. So in terms of that, I think we're pretty well covered. In terms of tools, tasers, impact weapons, less lethal, all that stuff, the objective is to have as many tools as possible so that you can use as little force as possible, right? The idea is that each one of these things offers you an opportunity to use a tool that's less force than what would otherwise be employed. So typically tasers are used for resisting individuals, and they can be used against people with edged weapons. In many times it's people that are actively fighting and resisting. Having been tased myself, I can tell you that it's an uncomfortable experience, but it's one that works well in a sense that when it's over, you leave with generally no residual effects. So there's typically, unless you suffer an injury in the process of being handcuffed or something like that, the taser itself usually leaves no residual effects on you. So a taser is a good opportunity. A good example of how we'd use the taser is over the summer, we had an individual that was reported to be walking in a store with a gun sticking out of their waistband. Our officers confronted that individual late at night on North Highland Avenue, walking down the street. They saw what appeared to be the gun in his waistband. It turned out later to be a pellet gun. I watched the video as this person several times, and the cops begged and pleaded with him, please don't reach for that gun. And several times kept motioning down to reach for the gun, and they didn't, and they didn't, and they didn't. And finally, they had an opportunity to get close enough to tase this person so that it didn't become a deadly physical force. And if you watch it, it watches just the way anything else, any tragic situation on TV plays out. And in this case, with patience and courage and training and the right tools, our officers did an incredible job using a taser in a place where in years past, that may have been someplace that may have resulted in use of a firearm. So tasers are an opportunity to use less force, not more.
Okay, thank you.
So Bob had his hand up, but Bob, I think somebody else covered your couple of questions. I just want to confirm.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
My questions pretty much have been hit in the general overview, so I will kindly yield my time to my other colleague.
Okay. Manny, you have questions?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions, more like clarifications, I guess, because Chief already went through some of that hiring process and what do we have. Chief, can you talk about a little bit more in the years that you've been in the force and in the years that you've been chief now? The diversity on our police department and what does that look like right now? And what do you think? And I know what you're saying, you know, we know that there's a deficiency within the county and how the tests are being advertised and the next steps for that. So I'm not going to talk about that because you and I had discussions about this 4 years ago about how much more do we have in it. And I think there's a lot of work on our behalf to work with the county to make sure things like this will never happen again, at least. But talk about the diversity in our department and what does that look like? And has there been is there a benefit? And what is the negative? The things that you have seen in our department, and not a negative in a bad way, but a negative of trying to engage more diversity, I guess, in the department itself, if anything.
What do you mean by engaging more diversity?
More diversity, like we know we have a limit, so we have a limit of people that we can reach through the exam, correct? It's like whoever scores the highest.
And only hire the people who take the exam, yes.
Correct. And then when we do need to go out of the list and we have to do a transfer, the limitation of bringing more people of color to the department is very limited. So what does that look like? Can you speak a little bit more into the details on that, if you can, please?
Sure. So one of the weaknesses in police culture is that we don't tend to recruit away from other departments, and it's, again, everything is, has good and bad to it. On one hand, it's seen as it's unpopular to go in other departments and try and steal away their officers of color in order to benefit your own department. Now, that's a shortcoming for us, but at the same time, I think that when we look at the big picture, are we really into fixing diversity in Ossining, or are we looking to fix diversity in policing? So I don't think there's necessarily, there's only a short-term benefit in stealing an officer away from another job because, they would adjust our numbers. I think that what we really want to do is we want to fix this county-wide, and that's the reason that for our recruiting pitch this year, we'll be working with the county chiefs in order to touch the entire county, because we want to make a meaningful change across the board. In terms of locally, transfers are there. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. I really, really like to offer jobs to local people when we can. When transfers are better suited, and transfers also offer an advantage of being ready quicker. So in other words, right now where we have 4 or 5 openings right now, if we were to take a transfer, we can put them through field training for 3 months and they go on the road, whereas a new hire would take, we would have to wait for the next academy class, then 3 months in the academy, then 3 months of field training. So there's a little bit of a longer road for a new hire than with a transfer. In terms of our numbers right now, I don't have that in front of me right now. So I don't recall what all of my numbers are, but I know that we had submitted that for, as part of the study. What I can tell you is that those things that are within our control right now, our detective division is 1/3 white males, 1/3 black males, and 1/3 Hispanic males. There are no women in the detective division right now. I'd love to see some. I'd love to see more women working in the police department. I'd love to see people from all of these demographics increase in our police department. So, the promotion exams, in terms of promotions, we've promoted some people of color. Not as many promotions have been of people of color, but also it's the same issue for promotions as it is for hiring. Those that take the exam and make themselves eligible, those are the people that we can choose from. So let me just distinguish. Detectives are an appointment. We can select anybody in the department that we want to go to those roles. Sergeants, lieutenants, captain are promotions. They have to take a civil service exam, just the same as getting hired, and we can only select people that have competed for that exam. So in addition to recruiting for hiring, some of the things that we've been doing is having conversations with our staff and talking to people that are from these underrepresented demographics and saying, look, we need your participation. And especially when you have somebody that's a strong leader that belongs in that role, sometimes they need to hear from someone who's been there to say, look, I believe in you and I think that you're the right person for the role. And that's part of what we're trying to do right now, is encourage more people to compete for promotion, because we don't typically get the entire patrol force competing in the sergeant's exam. We typically get 8 or 9 people taking that out of the 45 that are in the patrol division.
Thank you, Chief. Now, for you to qualify to take the sergeant exam as soon as you're a patrol officer, how many years do you have to be in under the department itself?
You have to have 4 years of continuous service before you can take that exam. And then for subsequent promotions, you do have to have a minimum amount of time and grade. So for instance, after becoming a sergeant, you have to have 1 year time and grade before you can take a promotion exam to lieutenant. From lieutenant to captain, you have to have another year in time and grade. So in order to promote up the ranks, it's 4 years to get to sergeant, 1 year as a sergeant to get to lieutenant, 1 year as a lieutenant to get to captain, 1 year as captain to move up. Unless the department decides to jump ranks, in which case you could potentially have a captain's exam that's open to lieutenants and sergeants. There's some nuance to civil service law that allows you to sort of bounce around a little bit like that, but in every case, there's a time limit that's required. So the next available sergeant's exam, oh boy, I'm not sure. I think we're coming up this year. I believe this summer is when we're expected to get the next sergeant's exam, but like all the rest of the exams, we'll find out a week before it's announced. It'll be announced for 30 days or less. And if anybody forgets their application or changes their mind at the last minute, they may miss out. I know I've seen police officers drive on the last day of registration for a sergeant's exam to Manhattan to get to the 24-hour post office in order to get their stuff postage marked.
But at the same time is, even though you can take those exams, that doesn't qualify you automatically to be a sergeant. It has to be an opening. It has to be, a vacant to be a fill, correct?
For every hire and every promotion, there's always that budget issue, right? So we have to have a budgeted position for somebody to fall into, and then the rule of 3 exists again. So if 9 people take the sergeant's exam, we can only pick one of the top 3.
Only if it's a vacant available, correct?
Well, first and foremost, we have to have a vacancy. So if there's not an opening, we can't promote anybody. But if there is an opening, you have to be able to promote one of the top 3. So for instance, if you have 3 people in your top 3 and number 4 is, I don't like to call people best because I have a lot of great people and they're all good for different reasons, but say number 4 is your absolute best in whatever organization you're in, you cannot promote number 4 simply because you want number 4. You must pick one of the top 3. Then that person will move up into the top 3 and you can select that person. So it's the civil service game.
Now, and I know we weren't going to be talking about policies, and then I haven't had the chance to read, but I know Westchester County just released their police reform package or draft at least. At least we got the email early this afternoon, and I'm not expecting you to have read the 179 pages that they released, but were you able to browse through it? Have you had a chance to look into that? What county is proposing at this point?
I skimmed it. There's a lot of reform going on, a lot of pages. I read Yonkers this morning is another 70-page report. I skimmed through the Westchester. There's a lot of content out there. The county is really a different type of agency. They don't have the same type of constituency that we do, in a sense that we report, while we report to the board, we answer to a community. And the folks that we impact are face-to-face, arm's length with us, whereas Westchester County has jurisdiction in the town of Cortland, which is a little bit spread out, and they have Mount Kisco, where they've got some community stuff going on there. A large part of their responsibility is parkways and county facilities and the airport and stuff like that, where they don't have like an everyday residential constituency. So some of their mandates from there, or the recommendations in their package, had some of it dealt with the training at the academy and some recommendations there. Some of it dealt with a concept of a county-wide complaint review process or something like that. There's essentially at every layer of government, there's some sort of police accountability initiative going on. So you've got the Attorney General's office, you've got the District Attorney's office, the county is looking at doing something. So the county one was a little bit big picture, more than ours. Ours really dealt intimately with how we interact with our community. Theirs was a little bit more broad.
I understand that, but the reason why I'm asking that is because what you just mentioned, and I think what the mayor was talking about in regards to training, sure, because we do use their facilities. We do a lot of mutual aid with them as well. We use a lot of the resources. So in regards to this reform itself, if there's something that they're going to be doing, maybe we can kind of piggyback in what they're, use their resources on a budgetary portion of it. So we don't have to use our local local budget to finance a program, if anything, sure. So that's sort of the idea and the concept. Sure, like what are they doing? More like to piggyback what the mayor was talking about is like, what is the training, and what kind of training are they providing in there? Can we suggest some of the stuff that we would like to see our officers to be trained on? Can they facilitate that portion in there before they leave the academy, for example? So that's sort of the mentality. And I'm not sure, again, I literally got it, I downloaded it, I have not read the whole report, but that's just, something that I'll be interested in advocating, at least in some of the extent.
Sure. I mean, look, we always think more training is better, and particularly for new recruits coming out. The academy we tend to view as a little bit more philosophical, in a sense that they're teaching you policing, but when you come here, we're teaching you how to be an Ossining cop. So all these sort of the implicit bias type things, the de-escalation type things, the responding to people in crisis, all those trainings, I mean, the more of that they add into the academy, the better product we get, the more we have to work with when someone gets here to learn our system. So yes, I think there's an opportunity for the village to to go ahead and support some of the things that are in that, because really we wouldn't be the ones to change that curriculum anyway. I think that some of those recommendations you could accomplish by merely supporting what the county's looking to push already.
And so, and that's very helpful, because every police officer actually in training, they has to go through the academy, and the academy is based on Westchester County. So it's not just Ossining, as we know, that is doing this police reform. Is every municipality within Westchester that will have to go through the same thing. So if someone has the same common, I guess, concern in regards to the training, that's something that we can advocate to Westchester County to improve their portion of their training and the academy portion. Just as a side note, so cities, because I know Yonkers has their own exam. I think White Plains has their own exam as well.
Cities have their own civil service commissions. So the city of New Rochelle has their own civil service commission. Mount Vernon has their own. They take their own test. Yonkers takes their own test. White Plains takes their own test.
Now, do they go to the same academy?
They do.
Okay, so that is the same. The only difference is the tests and how they select the I guess the process that they have to go through, correct?
The city of Peekskill uses the Westchester County Towns and Villages test. They'll be listed on there, but everybody in Westchester County, those other agencies have their own civil service commissions, but everyone in Westchester goes to the same police academy.
Yeah, all right. I don't have any questions right now for the chief. Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Hey, I think this is super informative. I do want to say that we run these meetings. These are this is the work session. Next week is the legislative session. We had oh, if it's sweet, I think the board did get, I can't remember, all the commentary from the working committee and members of the public. I don't remember if it was just Jennifer Cabrera or a larger group within the working committee, but there was a request for an additional meeting with the board, and where we were able to do it is to have a meeting with members of the working committee currently scheduled for March 2nd. And so I just wanted to announce that, because in my announcements, I didn't announce that. So while I have running phone, there's about 12 attendees. I'm looking at it, and 12 people in the gallery right now. So while I have people's attention, I just wanted to announce that people want to join in the conversation. March 2nd, I think it's the same, it's at 7:30. It's called a special meeting. There's not so much special about it. The truth is that we, in January, we do a reorganization plan. We announce all the legislative meetings. We announce all of the work sessions, anything, and we publicly announce any other meetings where the 5 of us are there. We have to publicly announce in the paper. Our attorney does that, and our village staff. So we had to make sure we had time to announce this. And we want things recorded. We want people to be able to view them at their convenience. We compete against lots of other Zoom meetings this year, lots of other things going on, including tonight. I think the Board of Education is meeting tonight, as a matter of fact. So this is helpful that we're all together. It's recorded. It's visible to the community, and it could be shared. And people can come on the website, and that is the point. When people of having these committees done this way, when we want to speak to folks in the work sessions, that we do this, and we're calling a special meeting in addition to the ones that we've already noticed. I stumbled on my words there. Sorry about that, folks. So I think, village manager, it's a working session, you bring people on, but I think that we're done with this part. I thank you, Chief. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. I think we're bringing on Joe Spinelli, and is there someone else on the PBA?
I see Joe here, so let's bring Joe on.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Joe.
How are you?
You could do video if you want. You don't have to do video. Not everybody chooses to. And apologies for the lateness of the evening, but that's where we are.
No, that's not a problem. I'm having a little issue with the video. Mike MacNamara, the PBA Vice President, he's here with me as well. We logged on together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mike is here.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. I don't think in all the years that I have been a trustee and now mayor that I've ever actually met with the PBA and with you, with the two of you. So welcome. And again, this is going to be we'd like to hear from you and what's on your mind.
All right, so the chief covered a lot, pretty much, what we were going to talk about, but we're going to address, speak about a few topics. First, we'd like to talk about the matrix report as a whole. We feel like during the whole process, the PBA itself and its members were underrepresented during the whole, drafting the report. So we just wish we were engaged earlier and a little more often. Because, we want to put it out there, we're approachable, we're willing to contribute and to help, and just wish, we were part of this process, sooner. Excuse me.
I'm just going to do a little point of clarity, Joe.
Yeah.
It's like a processing thing.
Yep.
If you want us to answer one by one or ask you questions, but I would prefer, if it works for you, please let me know if it does or doesn't, that you go through whatever commentary you have and then the board can respond. So if you want to ask us questions and have respond one by one, please let us know. This is,
No, I'll
yeah,
go through some points.
it's a conversation to educate each other. So do you want to go through some of your commentary and then we will respond or ask questions or have a conversation at the end?
Yeah, I'll just go through it. It's basically like
Okay.
statements and comments.
Thank
So,
you.
just, with the, our concerns, the report. We only had one PBA officer on the committee. There was some miscommunication between the matrix and interviews with the officers. I know the matrix contacted them, our guys got back, and then they never heard from them. So there was some miscommunication with that. Also, I would have been beneficial, I believe, if they would have spoke with our detective division. Like the chief said, they're our most diverse unit, and I'm sure they could have had a lot of positive feedback for the survey or the report as a whole. We were kind of disappointed with the survey itself, the way it was conducted. It was a very small sample, and I don't know if it reached everyone, and we don't know if it reflects, the community's opinion very accurately. Moving on, just going to mention the Civilian Review Board. I know we spoke about it. We spoke about it with the chief quite a bit, but we do feel that removing the police from the board, it doesn't help build relationship with the police and the public, and I don't think it would be a benefit, especially since the board itself, the review board, is made up of, it's an all new board of all civilian members. I don't know if they have maybe a year, but they having an experienced officer to guide them and explain how police are trained and why they respond to certain situations would definitely, be beneficial. Also, a recommendation in the report for the CCR, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, was to trim down the training. I believe there's 11 core topics. They want to cut it down to 3. Specifically mentioned, like domestic violence shouldn't be part of the core training. Just for example, in the last 3 months, we responded to 100 domestic disputes. So taking the cops off and reducing the training isn't going to benefit anyone. We're just going to touch on training as a whole. As a point out, I'm sure the chief mentioned it, but we are a New York State accredited agency. We exceed the minimum requirements when it comes to training. Probably train more than most departments. That being said, as far as training goes, we're always receptive to additional training. That's just going to benefit everyone. Crisis intervention training, would be a benefit. This would be more of a countywide thing, but the mobile crisis team that they had in the past, if they could bring that back, that'd be a good thing. And we're willing to be a part of that and help out. And we're just going to talk a little bit about community policing. So as the chief said, we already do a lot We do movies in the park, kickball, block parties, coffee with a cop, candy cane runs. We've done a ton of birthday drive-bys since COVID. We're in the schools. Our guys are stopping in local businesses on all tours on the midnight. So there's always room for improvement, but we're out there. Just want you to, know that we are engaging with the community. As far as recruitment goes, like we spoke about, there's civil service law that dictates how it goes, but whatever the PBA could do to help get the message out there and help and promote the exams, we're on board. So, so if the village has any requests or additional ways members can interact or any suggestions for community policing, are open. And just in closing, just want to put it out that many of our officers live here in the village. We're open to help out any change that will benefit the community. That the members here, the officers, take this job very serious. And thanks for having us. And we look forward to continuing these discussions as we move forward.
Thank you, officers. I'm not very good at knowing all of the appropriate protocols of the different levels of the officers and police officers. So apologies in advance if I don't get your ranks right, etc. I'm going to kick it off again for this one because you said two things that are intriguing. So first of all, thank you for presenting with, your thoughts. I could spend all day and all night talking about whether Matrix used the best process for surveying, whether it was statistically valid or not statistically valid, whether the communications were the best or the worst. We could spend hours and hours, and I'm happy to discuss this, and many of us have discussed it with various people. It's new to everybody involved in this entire process. Not forming committees or appointing committees, volunteers. We have a lot of volunteer groups and they work at different levels. And this particular group, I think, was tasked with a very, some call it historical, but a very deep and wide task. And without a lot of guidance from the governor and the executive order, there were lots of ideas of how it should be done, but these are not mandates. They're sort of ideas on how different municipalities should do things. And some people read it literally, and some people looked at it and said, well, these are nice guidelines and they're resources, but that's not the way we want to do it. So there are many ways to run these things. But what's interesting to me is that I think the plan is a terrific work. Personally, that's my opinion, and there's a lot of really great stuff in it. Two things that you mentioned. So I don't know if I can go through all of the list. Maybe one of my colleagues will. But what I would like to ask you, because you have an expertise that I don't, is I'd like your opinion about something. Community, and you use the word, and I know it's in a number of plans, and certainly it's in the plan that we received, community policing. So there was a conversation, I sat on one of these that talked about, and I believe, I don't know if it's appropriate or not to mention people's names because it was of subcommittees and groups, but there was a specific request for more community policing where there is a community officer actually assigned to different neighborhoods in some cases, or sort of different segments of the community or by neighborhood, etc. The point being that an officer builds a relationship, community policing, walks the beat, gets to know people. In neighborhoods that might have more Spanish-speaking people, make sure that person speaks Spanish, and it's part of the neighborhood. What are your thoughts about that, about sort of taking police officers and creating an alliance between specific police officers in community policing? And our role as local government is even though this is a national subject, and even though the mandate and the executive is from the state, the reality is that we are here to really look at Ossining. So that's where I want to focus. What is your opinion about that idea of the community policing by neighborhoods?
No, I mean, community, if that's a good thing because the community members get to know that officer. You know, if there's always someone different, they might not be as comfortable talk to someone once they build a rapport with that officer. They know, or I could say like that's their, you know, their local cop, the one they feel comfortable speaking with. As far as community policing goes, I mean, we pretty much do that every day. Just, you know, walking into a store or walking into a school. You know, when the weather permits, we have a bicycle unit. We get the bikes out. Same thing with walking posts when manpower permits.
Okay.
So
And-
expand. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. I didn't mean. I it's hard because I'm not seeing you, so I can't tell if you were at the end of your sentence. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. No, so we could always expand on, you know, community policing, branch out to, you know, different parts of the village, you know, walking posts, bikes. And if you could get someone, if we have the manpower, we're able to dedicate someone to a certain area, definitely beneficial.
So I have 3 questions, and then I'm sure my colleagues
Yeah.
do. My second question is, you mentioned something that I'm very unfamiliar with. So if I've learned one thing about being in this job is that it's the most amazing opportunity to learn about everything in government related to communities. I'm going to take this opportunity to learn something new. What exactly is the mobile crisis unit that you referred to and then said that it should come back or it doesn't exist? What exactly is that? And what happened to it? And why are you thinking that it should come back?
Okay, so I don't remember how long ago, that was an old unit based out of the county. I forget exactly when they stopped operating, but it was basically a 24-hour mobile team that responded to mental health calls. So if, say, for instance, we had a call of a possible suicidal person, they would be contacted and they would respond with us to the scene. But it was, I believe part of it was funding and manning it. So at some point it became, excuse me, they weren't able to keep it up.
Right. Because funding, actually, the county for all, and Manny, I know you spoke about it. The truth is very little of any of this comes with funding. So much of the funding is actually done at our level, at the local. So things that are down a county, except for things like the academy, become complicated because which of the local municipalities want to participate, which don't. But I was just intrigued by it. So this is really related to mental health 24/7, something like that. So I'll do more research on it, but I'm happy that you brought it up. And lastly, I know, you know, 3 or 4 months ago, I didn't know very much about PBA except what everybody else reads about it. But now I know a little bit more. And also I've read a lot of publications about the PBA, you know, it's national organization. I mean, it's an organization. It's a police benevolent association. So is there something that the PBA as an organization, is there something in its plans that you could share with us? You may not be privy to all the information, you may simply not know, that is doing to talk about recruiting and hiring more people of color into the police force?
That's something that we would work together with the chief with, because I know they have some plans with, he's working on stuff with the chiefs of police to help out recruiting. But you know, we'll be active. We'll support it, and we'll do what we can.
But currently, do you know of any strategy or program that they have in place?
But I don't know specifics right now. As the chief mentioned, we have the computer here in the lobby where people could walk in and sign up for the police test.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. I I'm going to turn this over to some of my colleagues because this is a conversation. So if anybody
Yeah,
has questions.
I'd like to just jump, just a couple things. Joe, thanks for coming. And Mac, thanks for coming. The crisis intervention team, I believe, was run out of Vosburg, the county hospital. And I did a little research on this. And I believe it was 10 or 12 years ago, maybe longer, when it disbanded. A lot of it was because of funding. And it's exactly how Joe described it. They were 24/7. They responded when they needed it. The people that I spoke to that were involved when it said it worked very well. It was a good thing. It helped, again, something like a suicidal, they call them in, and it's another resource that we have that it works. I did speak to one of our county legislators briefly because she was going into a meeting to go over the county proposal at the time. So I will reach out back to her, and it's a deeper subject, and I think just form a team. There's a lot to it, and I think something like that needs to really be seriously looked at and brought back, because you never know what you're going to run into. All right, so but that's what I have on that. And just to touch base on what the mayor said, this is the process. Was there opportunities missed? Probably. This is all new to us. Never done it. Was there an outline given to us? A basic outline? Yeah, but was it telling you who to pick for a committee, who to do this, and who to... It's, we do our best job trying to reach out to the community and pick the people that we think would help us with this. Again, I'm going to say, like my father used to say, that's why they make chocolate and vanilla. We can't put everybody on the board, but we're doing our best to be as transparent as possible in asking questions and having people attend and doing it the right way. And again, we know we can't make everybody happy. We try, we do our best, but I just wanted to get that out there, that, we're not here. We're here trying to make this work. We want the PBA involved. We want the chief involved. We want the residents involved. So I just wanted to touch on that. And just one more thing on the recruitment. I understand what's being said about diversity, but if they don't take the test, they're not on the list. So promoting this is a huge effort. And I'll make sure that when this does come out, that we, I talk with village staff, and maybe we put something out there, get it on the website, get it out there, put a couple flyers out in local stores, all the different little communities, all the little, the Spanish delis, to, wherever we're, just to get it out, to get the message out there and let them know. Just go down to police headquarters, you could fill it out. It's, I think there's a misconception that we're just not hiring people of color or someone that speaks Spanish. If they're not on the list, you can't be hired. So, there's an effort on their part too, to want to be a cop. So it's not just reaching out and grabbing a person of color or of something of that nature. It's, they've got to do their part to do it too, but we got to try and help them get there. And I think that's an effort we have to put our foot forward on this, a big effort on promoting this. That's all I have. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Bob. Does anybody else? I can't tell.
I have a
Dana, you've got your hand up? Okay.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, how are you?
I don't, are you a police officer in Ossining as well?
Yes, I'm sergeant here in Austin.
Okay. And then the PBA did the PBA have someone on the working committee?
We had one member on the working committee.
And how did that go? Was he able to communicate your ideas? Did he bring something to the table?
He did. It's just, I know it was a lot for probably one person to deal with. So I just think a little more representation probably would have been beneficial.
Oh, so you thought that one person wasn't enough? Okay.
Right. 'Cause there's a lot of subcommittees and, you know, it can be overwhelming, I'm sure. I know it's a lot of work goes into this.
Yeah, people work very hard. Okay, well, that was my my only question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I can't speak up.
I can I can go, Mayor.
There you go. Thanks, Omar.
Thank you. Sergeant Spinelli, Officer MacNamara, thank you for coming on tonight. So I have a comment and a question. So my comment is that I receive and kind of we receive your perspective on the process and the content of the draft. And thank you for giving us that feedback. I think it's helpful for people in the community that may be watching this, whomever they may be, to have a sense of how this all works. So we are receiving your feedback in the same way that we received feedback from other stakeholders, and are taking those things into consideration when ultimately putting together the draft that we're going to be bringing forward to the state. But I don't want anything that we do or don't do tonight to be perceived as being either agreeing or disagreeing with anything that you said. We receive what you say. We get it. We appreciate the comments, and we're not in a position to kind of go back and forth with what we agree or disagree with. So that's the comment. The question is with respect to the school resource officers. This is a newer topic that wasn't in the original draft from January 27th, and would love to get your perspective about the role of officers in schools.
Officers in schools?
Yes, the role of officers in schools.
We think, you know, it's a good thing. You know, we walk through schools, you know, during the day talks. I work days, and when we're in, the little kids, they're happy to see us. You know, and then you get to know them as they go through the school district and they get older. You know, it's good to be able to communicate with the students. They get an understanding of what our job is, what we do. This way we could, you know, how to say it, you know, we don't want them to have any fears or be afraid of the police. If you start, you know, communicate with them at a young age, you could build a good relationship with them, you know, through their, you know, their years in the school district.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. That is the balance of my comments and questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Manny. Anything? That hasn't been asked or?
No, thank you. No, I just want to thank the PBA, obviously Joe and Officer Sergeant Spinelli and MacNamara for this. It's just more like I want to have a clarification real quick, because I know there was 2 police officers on the working committee. One of them was represented by the PBA, obviously, but it was in reality all the police officers within the department, except for the chief, they belong to the PBA, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, but there was two police officers on the working committee, correct?
One from representing the PBA and a department. So essentially they were separate, but yeah, 2.
No. I understand that, but just as a point of clarification itself, there was 2 police officers. They both are part of the PBA, but one of them was representative, a direct representative, I want to say, as a PBA, and the other one was more like I want to say a regular police officer from the department, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I want to kind of piggyback on what was said, you know, even from the chief and what you guys said before in regards to recruiting itself. Do you know if other PBAs within New York I want to be as big as I can. Do they do any recruitment at all on behalf of the department, or that doesn't usually happen? Do you know?
I can't really speak for other PBAs, not that I know of. I mean, we communicate with other departments, but as far as specific recruiting from other jobs, I haven't personally seen anything.
Yeah, because I know as a PBA, you guys do a lot of activities, not as a department, but as a PBA. You guys do a couple activities throughout the village as well. And some of the members that do a lot of the activities are, they don't, all the activities that are done by the department, like Coffee with the Cops, movie and in the parks and all of these things of nature, there are officers, they're doing that in their own free time, correct?
Yeah, PBA events, that's the officers doing on their own time.
Hey, Manny, it's Mike MacNamara. I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
As far as recruiting countywide, I'm not aware of anything that other PBAs do personally. I will tell you with the stuff that we do in the community, like the movies in the park, the kickball, reading in the schools, just our daily, interaction with the community and the students. Any chance we get, we're always looking for people. We're always, talking up about becoming a police officer. We have countless youths in the school that just run up to us and say, "Hi, police officer. I want to be a police officer when I'm older." And I could speak personally for myself. I've always told them, well, you have any questions, you could always ask a police officer. You need to be good in school. You need to do stuff in the community. So as we're always doing it, not as a broad type, let's put out posters and stuff like that, but just during our everyday interaction with the community, we're always recruiting.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you for that clarification. Now, I don't know enough of the intervention and the help portion. I know for what I was reading a little bit of what New York City and the new program that they established. And I think it was very selective for different neighborhoods, in regards to health interventions and things of that nature, that 911 calls that that they were going to be sending out for someone that was having some mental health problems, that they were not going to be sending out police officers anymore. They were going to send out this additional staff that is a pilot program that they call it. Again, there was very specific and specific neighborhoods within New York City itself. Have you guys heard or know more about that within a sense of what New York City is doing?
As far as New York City, we know New York City, it's its own separate animal. They do different things. They, see a lot more different things than we do. They definitely have the resources. As far as my opinion, with just sending crisis just by themselves, the one thing I think everyone's overlooking is, God forbid, they can't control the situation and people start getting hurt. What happens then? Well, the police officers are going to get called, whereas if they were called in the beginning to go with these individuals, maybe it could have been prevented. So as far as New York City, they're always doing different things, whether it works or not. I wouldn't want to be an individual that's trying to deal with someone going through, mental health crisis, and God forbid, I can't get through to the individual, and then that individual turns violent, and there's nobody there to protect me.
Manny, I will say, for something like that to work, it would have to be, county-wide. Like, we support it, but, the village here wouldn't have the resources to man something like that 24/7. But it's definitely,
it's a joint effort that it would take, that's in our eyes bigger than just Ossining. It's definitely on a monetary issue. It's very, very expensive, but that's for the board to discuss and decide if they want to do it or not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And this is going to be my last question. And I think maybe, I know the chief is still there. just because he may, you know, or either Joe or Mike can actually respond to this. In regards to the 911 calls, correct? Let's say we decide to go with a countywide program or something like this. I know. Can you go really brief? I guess the details and if I call 911, where does it go? Sure. And how does that work itself? If it's something like that, where the police has to show up, whether the fire department has to show up, who determines what is the response time in something like this? Is it OVAC supposed to be coming in? You know, can you just kind of go briefly on that, Joe or Mike or Kevin, if you can, please?
Yeah, I think the chief would be better suited to answer that.
All 911 calls, or are we talking about crisis intervention type stuff here? Is that what we're really looking for?
Both, I guess. Yes, please.
So listen, the reality of the situation for the police department these days is not necessarily that we want to go on all the calls, because first and foremost, you know, we talked a little bit about the crisis team coming back. The reality of that is that it needs to be at a county level because it is entirely too expensive for any one municipality to manage. In the short term, some things that we can do to bring added benefit is that we send officers through crisis intervention training, and everybody gets crisis intervention in the police academy, but we need some people with like more in-depth training that can go on these things. Our officers do a tremendous job with these things right now, not because they want to, because we are the only people willing to respond. We've had 2 crisis calls in the last month. One of them, a person with a firearm who was successfully talked out without incident and transported for treatment. The other one, a person in crisis that was transported with treatment, where the crisis team told us that they'd be nervous to go on that call themselves and then stayed in their offices. So the reality is that right now our cops are going on these calls not because we want to or we think we're best suited to do it. We're the only ones that'll go. And when people are in crisis and their family calls because they're afraid and people are either a danger to themselves or others, we're the only ones willing to go. So first and foremost, it's that it's not our intention to handle those calls, and there are other people that we think have more long-term, better suited training to handle those things. It should be a partnership. Like most other things, I think there's a time where there's time and place for police officers to be there, but it really should be mental health professionals leading the charge on those things. I don't think we should be left out altogether, but we're not looking to step in somebody else's realm. So right now we handle a lot of things that may be outside the scope of policing or what police officers should or are really best suited to do, but we do that because we're the only agency that's available right now, and we're dedicated to keeping people safe.
Can you talk about 911 calls and how does that work?
Sure. So if you call 911 from a landline, it's going to go directly to police headquarters. If you're a 911 line within this municipality, it will come directly to headquarters. So 911, that's going to be for police, fire, or ambulance. If you call 911 from a cell phone, so many people, like I do not own a landline in my home anymore. If you dial 911 from a cell phone, it goes to the traffic management center down in Hawthorne, that big barracks on the side of the spring down there. And it's a central 911 for all of the cell phones in the area. They will then answer the phone. State police will answer the phone down there, and they will disseminate those calls out to the proper jurisdictions. So there is intention long-term to have an enhanced 911 system where cell phones can go direct to different municipalities. That doesn't exist yet.
Now, how does OVAC? Because I know OVAC has a different system, and I know you guys it used to be one system, but now they have a different system. Can you talk about a little bit of that? Because when an emergency happens, obviously OVAC gets called as well, correct?
Services are routed different ways. So if you call for an ambulance and you call 911 from a cell phone, if you call from a landline, it'll come here. We transfer you to Westchester County Emergency Services. They'll dispatch the ambulance. We send a police officer along with. If you call on a cell phone, they will call fire control and they'll patch us in so we can listen to the call. Or it'll always go through state police and then to the county. County will then patch us in so we can listen so that we can send a police officer along with them. But OVAC is dispatched by Westchester County.
What is the time frame in a phone call? And is that the most effective way, I guess? That's what I'm trying to get. Is that the most effective way to get for someone that actually needs help, correct? Because that's what they use in 911 at that point.
There's a lot of advantages to shared services. I've always enjoyed having all of our emergency services headquartered in one building. So we dispatch full-time for the fire department, and we had OVAC until a few years back when they decided to go with Westchester County. One of the advantages is that Westchester County's records management system matched up with OVAC's, and it allowed them to get different pieces of data transferred over without having to call or manually input things. So there were some logistical issues in terms of why they went there. In terms of time delay, it's probably a matter of a few seconds. Certainly we never want to have any added delays in, but we had no control over where OVAC went for their dispatch. That was their decision, and we can't stop them.
Thank you.
Hey.
I don't have any additional questions. Thank
Great.
you, Chief, and thank you, Joe and Mike.
I thank all of you guys. We did try to put time frames on it. We'll get better. I think people just had lots of questions. The reason we have lots of questions is because we've all been reading, educating ourselves, looking at the plan, looking at some of the really strong and powerful ideas that we are thinking about and educating ourselves about. I think Omar made an excellent point. I want to sort of do that again as a public statement. We are listening to lots of different people in lots of different ways. We use the plan as our sort of our core path forward work that has been done by members of the public with representation from the people that were appointed. I want to say that we do not have spitting matches at these meetings. I've gone to other Zoom calls where it gets really loud and raucous, and some people like that. We are, as a group, we generally like to listen. We take the information back, synthesize, and then we do speak to each other, and we do that individually as a group. So for me, it's been really educational, but I do want to echo what Trustee Lopez said. We take information in. The fact that we agree or disagree or didn't ask some questions that people thought we should have asked today or didn't ask is a reflection of about nothing, to be honest with you. We simply came to this meeting because we wanted to have some questions answered, and I think we've accomplished that. And that's what this was. And that is how we enter most of our public engagements. We are there to listen and hear, not to debate and argue with people, but to actually hear it. And that's the goal. And we'll do it again March 2nd. We have a meeting on Wednesday. And yes, Saturday, Spanish language, brought to you by and Deputy Mayor Quezada and Trustee Lopez will be moderating that meeting because your mayor does not speak Spanish well enough, and I apologize in advance, and one of these days I will. I do speak more than one language, but Spanish just isn't one of them, one of these days. So just wanted to remind folks, share that with people that you know, your friends, your neighbors, your churches, whatever. The more, the merrier. I cannot say that enough about the public engagements. Ladies and gentlemen, village manager, I turn it back to you, but I believe that we might be done with this portion and we are going into something else. Stuart, what are we going into?
We have executive session on 2 brief matters involving litigation, Mayor.
Okay. Madam village manager, anything you need to add before we?
No, I'm just trying to see if we need to go to the board, BOT meeting. BOE meeting, I'm sorry.
They're still going, okay.
They're still going. So, no, we are done. Our board meeting is done. The Board of Education meeting, if you want to tune in for another meeting, is still going on.
In case anybody is bored tonight and wants to go to yet another board, we have more boards. But thank you. I'm going to do a shout out. Miss Vernon either was already while we've been on here or is being honored. For those of you that don't know, please tune in and see it recorded from their meeting. The village today created in her honor, and the list goes on. But in her honor, we do have a Francine Vernon Day this Friday. She is an amazing woman, amazing story, and amazing family to have in our village. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Need a second. Motion to.
Second, I was trying to. I got a second. I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Well, you have to say we have to take the vote. So I say everybody's voted, right? As a
yes.
yes.
All in favor. Aye.
sorry.
So moved.
Aye.
Sorry.
Good night.
Good
That's all right.
night.
Good night.